The following is a conversation or virtual roundtable, if you will, that was hosted by the Deep Share podcast. I would like to thank my friend very much for bringing me on. It was an honor, and I was very grateful to be on there, particularly because we had a very lengthy discussion with what I would refer to as some very well-versed individuals, not just within the UFO community, but also within different communities pertaining to things like Bigfoot, esotericism, and things like that. We touch on everything from psychedelics to the materialistic realm to, of course, the UFO Pentagon disclosure report that I personally think is going to be a nothing burger. But more importantly than that, we touch on things like Lou Elizondo, Stephen Greer, other people within the, I guess you could say, UFO disclosure realm. Are they CIA psyops? Are they not? We ponder in this segment a lot of questions that many of you have been asking me within the live streams or on text message or things like this. So I encourage all of you to watch all of it as extensively as you can, but if you are on a bit of a time frame, I would highly recommend you watch the latter half of this entire roundtable, specifically the second half of it, because it connects to a lot of different apparatuses and aspects, if you will, pertaining to things like, ancient aliens, not the show, but, aliens being around for a long time, different underground cave dwellings, I guess you could say exogenesis, hybrids, extraterrestrials, different forms of experimentation. So without further ado, please do enjoy. Cheers.
We'll get that worked out.
Thank you.
But yeah, thank you guys so much for joining me. I'd like to just kind of go around and because this is the first time we're all talking together except for the two of you on the Union of the Unwanted, which is awesome. It's another great podcast that everybody should be listening to. Absolutely. So anybody who wants to start and say hi to my listeners, the Deep Share listeners, go right ahead.
I'll jump in. Hi, this is Eric Stone. I'm Andy and I have been friends for like 20 years now, since we bonded over our corn t-shirts freshman year of high school. I'm really, really excited for this conversation because I'm very, very fascinated by it, super open-minded, excited about all the stuff, but I'm not in the weeds at all. I'm barely scratching the surface. So super excited to meet everybody here. I know for a fact that you all have an immense amount of expertise. So really excited to hear some educated opinions that I can count on to kind of rise above the static that I'm seeing out there.
Not me. I've got no expertise, I assure you. My name's Charlie Robinson. I'm the host of Macroaggressions podcast. I'm one of the 4 hosts of the Union of the Unwanted, and I'm an author. So I've written a couple of books, and UFOs are not my specialty, but I did cover a section in my first book, The Octopus of Global Control, about the fraud and lies of NASA. So anytime you start to poke around in that area, you get into UFOs, of course. And so I have a tiny bit of experience with it, not like in a personal way, not like I've ever seen one or had a weird experience, but I've always been fascinated in the topic. And so when you cover, like I do, control structures and government lies and things like that, you inevitably get brought into that as a topic. So I'm really excited to get weird with the rest of you today.
My name is Dave Zed. I'm host of the Generation Z podcast, and we basically cover everything UFO, intelligence operations, a little bit of the paranormal side of things, and just looking forward to, and I'm very honored to be here, and I'm very thankful as well. So thank you for having me.
Thank you guys all. I'm the honored one to be able to get you guys all on at the same time. And Charlie, you mentioned that this isn't like your area of expertise, but on the latest Union of the Unwanted, when you guys were kind of just shooting the shit for a couple hours, you went pretty hard on this topic at one point, and that sold me right there. I was like, I love Charlie's work already, but that angle right there is literally what I'm looking for, because I've spent so much time, and this is for everybody now, I've spent so much time on social media lately looking at specifically what I used to call part of our community that has completely flipped, and UFO Twitter being a prime example is kind of freaking me out, because groups of people, and specific people even that I have followed for a long time, suddenly speaking a language that I don't understand anymore. And it seems that what I'm seeing is the same level of earnest bowing down and bending over for the intelligence community is happening, similar to the, people getting vaccine tattoos and making songs dedicated to Anthony Fauci. It's a very interesting parallel that's going on. And it might be, in my opinion, what could break them down. It could let the house of cards fall, because this side of things, there's a huge community of very passionate, very intelligent, and well-read people that are not having this disclosure. And if anybody wants to jump in, I just want to kind of leave this as a kind of an open-ended conversation. Let's jump all over it.
If somebody makes a song about praising Lou Elizondo, they're getting blocked. I'm just telling you right now. That is 100% happening.
Yeah, so I saw a new, so like I said, like not super deep into this stuff, right? So I'm on Twitter and I see somebody like a repost of a New York Times article. And the New York Times article is like, the upcoming quote unquote disclosure, according to a high ranking official, is like nothing is going to be revealed. It's all going to be like, they're not going to commit to anything. They're not going to give us any new information whatsoever. It's like, what's that about? Because Andy, I know I mentioned it to you and you were like, oh, that's Lou Elizondo. I don't know who that is.
Well, I think he's a name that's popping up more and more now. But yeah, if Dave, go ahead, go right ahead.
Well, Mr. Elizondo was formerly the head of a secret Pentagon program that was studying UFOs. Now, what's interesting though is that it just goes to show you that even within these secret programs, there are still people that don't know what's going on. That's how compartmentalized it usually is. He was accused of being a fraud, a fake, until he brought out his credentials in addition to his resignation letter from, and also his superiors signing off on it. So they kind of shut up after that. But to add what you were saying at the beginning, Deep Share, about how there's disclosure and all that, there's not, and to add to what Charlie was saying too, there's nothing like it when the intelligence community partners up with the mainstream media to try and throw a bunch of stuff at us. And I say that sarcastically, but there's nothing like it when, especially when the military industrial complex gets involved. Now, without me going on too much of a rant, because I did want to ask all of your guys' opinions on Lou Elizondo, I would say with regards to disclosure, there are many different factions, including non-human factions, that are vying for somewhat of a timing of a release of disclosure. And apparently back in the 80s under Reagan, there were a couple times that up until the 11th hour, disclosure was going to come, and then it got stopped and prevented by other forces, if you will. So for what's complicated is that, in my perspective, from my research, to say that there is a shadow government that's holding all of this back and they have one big plan, yes and no. I think there are different elements within this shadow government. Some factions are saying, okay, let's just get it out there. Other factions of it are saying we still need to hold on, which is why we see, for example, different agencies pulling on different strings, because, NASA, the CIA, the Pentagon, one person says one thing, another Navy fighter pilot says another thing, and then, it's just all over the place. Right. So some people don't like Mr. Elizondo. Some people say he's not consistent, but there's also been a lot of lies thrown out about him too. So even myself, just curious, like, where do you guys stand on him from what you've seen?
I don't trust the guy at all.
Okay. Can I ask why? I'm curious.
Yeah, it's real simple. CIA.
Yeah. Okay. Got you.
Once the CIA, always CIA. I will never trust anybody that was ex-CIA, used to be CIA. I don't care. Fair. Automatic disqualification when it comes to disclosure, which I'll be honest. So my personal feel, 100%, I believe that there is something else out there. I believe that we've had contact with it. I believe that people inside parts of the government know more about this than others. I do believe it's extremely compartmentalized, so it's hard to tell who knows what. And I would like for us to be honest about this and have the conversation like adults and say, look, let's talk about what's really going on out there. All right. It's not, yes, it's going to be tough for some people. Some people are going to freak out, but we can't worry about that. We're trying to, I want the truth, so I want as much information as possible. However, when it comes from a CIA connected guy and it's on the mainstream media, I just will not believe any of it. Now, will I throw some good information out with the bad? Probably, but that's okay with me, because I take that guy and that group. To the Stars Academy has over 100 years of CIA experience sitting on their board of directors. Why anybody would take them seriously is beyond me. I just like I said, it's automatic disqualification.
If I could add to what you said there very quickly, I also feel that, again, in addition to what I said about Mr. Elizondo, at the same time, you raise a very good point, because he's only on CNN and Fox and all this because he's been allowed to be put on there.
Right.
That's what I feel like you're getting at.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if one of us has the goods and we want to get on CNN or Fox News or anything, it's never going to happen.
Right.
But Lou Elizondo, through his, obviously, I mean, we know about Operation Mockingbird. We know the CIA and the media have a very tight relationship. If they want him to be on the nightly news, they'll put him on the nightly news. My question is, so we've had at least 60 years of the nightly news telling everybody that they're crazy for believing this, or, the I don't know, it was the governor of Arizona or the mayor of Phoenix, whoever it was, and with the Phoenix Lights thing comes out and says, we've caught the culprit, and brings out the guy in the alien mask and everything. And they're like, ha. So we've been ridiculed and called conspiracy theorists and made to feel like morons for 60 plus years. Now, all of a sudden, it's just nightly news. Like, oh yeah, of course it's happening. It's too convenient for me. These are organizations that have zero credibility, in my opinion, but the mainstream media and the CIA. And so I want disclosure, but is it too much for me to ask that I want it on my own terms? You know what I mean? I want it a different way than this. It's like, I still believe that those things are out there and happening. But as soon as you get CIA and the mainstream media, it's just got disinfo written all over it, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And you mentioned it being like 60, 70 years. And that kind of struck a nerve with me, because I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I keep seeing that amount of time in the news, and it's just repeated over and over again, just as we in the UFO community have repeated it over and over again. They're literally giving us seemingly almost exactly what we want. But before we keep going, I want to say hi to Mark from My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast. Welcome,
Hello.
sir.
How's it going, Mark?
Good. How are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Cool.
So, Mark, why don't you just give a real quick introduction to my audience, just to tell everybody who you are and everything, and we'll jump in.
Cool. Thanks for having me. First and foremost, pleasure to be here with Bruce Benton and Charlie Robinson and Zed, and of course the Deep Share podcast. I don't know if they all showed up yet, but thanks.
Bruce isn't here yet.
Really...
Bruce isn't here yet, but he'll be here soon, hopefully. But
cool. Yeah, I really feel like it's an honor to be here, especially considering I'm not a UFO expert, but I do have a strong opinion on it. So yeah, thanks for inviting me, man. If anybody's interested or hasn't heard before, my show's called My Family Thinks I'm Crazy, and it's been getting crazier and crazier each week.
Yes, nice. It has. It's awesome, man. Awesome. And yeah, I know that you're not an expert in it, and I know that you do have a very particular perspective on it. And I definitely kind of line up with a lot of what you kind of get into on the esoteric side of things. And I think we should definitely get into that later, because I think the symbolism there and the research done by many people, many hardworking people in the field, have kind of unveiled a lot of interesting connections between ancient symbolism and what this could all mean in a way, possibly, if it connects to the ancient idea of UFOs coming here or something like that. But we were getting into the idea of discussing our opinions on Lou Elizondo in general, because he has become the front runner, if you say, he's kind of become, if we take him at face value, to be the hero of the people now. Is he not? He's speaking that big, the government is lying to us, and now they've erased my emails. And, I don't want to go out on a limb and just immediately not trust him. But as Charlie said, there's disinformation written all over this with his CIA experience. How can you turn right around so recently after working for the DOD for so long and suddenly become, this hero of the people as he seemingly is becoming?
Well, if sorry.
Okay. I was just gonna say, like, the notion that we could all of a sudden like take these people who we have kept like that have been behind the curtain forever, and we've like, what are they up to? What are they up to? The notion that they would pull back the curtain and all of a sudden just reveal it all to us on CNN, on the nightly news.
Yeah.
Like, The fact of the matter is, I don't think we're the audience that they're trying to convince or convey. Like, it's my mom, right? Like, my mom outside with my kids right now, and she's like, I think I've been watching too much Fox News. It's like, you've been watching Eddie, you've been watching too much. But it's like, she's telling, she's like, we were talking about like recent political things that are happening, and like and no disrespect to the woman, love her to death, but her demographic, they eat everything that they're fed, right? And like, there's no questions asked whatsoever. So, but the fact of the matter is, I think that's the vast majority of people, right? So it's kind of up to, with anything like this, I think it's up to folks like us and more fringe communities to start to push back a little bit and ask these questions and call into questions. Like, just because you have the resume and you have the credentials doesn't necessarily mean too much. The idea of compartmentalization has come up a few times, and like, if you've worked at any big corporations, like I work at a big company, and our marketing department is like 300 people, and like, that's just one department, and like, there's teams that are doing things that other teams have no idea about, and the person at the top has no idea what I'm doing day to day. And like, and Andy, you and I have talked about this before. Like, I refuse to believe that the government operates any differently. They're not more efficient than a corporation. They're probably much less so. The communication across departments isn't any better. So, I mean, everything that you guys are saying about, I mean, this is all the first time learning about Lou Elizondo, but it makes perfect sense to me. I don't know why we would all just believe it.
Well, if I could jump in very quickly, a couple things to add to what all of you guys have recently said. So first off, there was a colonel by the name of Colonel Philip J. Corso. He was one of the soldiers at the time who got hands on with the Roswell crash, and we know that for a fact because there's proof. There's pictures of him shaking hands with with President Eisenhower and things like that, and nobody knows why and what have you. Now, he said in his book, according to some other generals too that knew about the disclosure and what have you, he said that the disclosure will be the cover-up and the cover-up will be the disclosure. Now, with that being said, what I took from that was disclosure is there for people that look for it. However, at the same time, Wernher von Braun, who arguably knew everything from A to Z with regards to extraterrestrials, Wernher von Braun, who was brought over from the Nazis via Operation Paperclip, he told his, I believe it was his niece on his deathbed, he said the overarching plan, not that they have a specific plan, like some diabolical plan where every little event makes a difference, but the overarching plan was, he said, it's going to be the communists in terms of, enemies of the West, so to speak. It'll be the communists, and then it's going to be terrorism, which makes sense because 9/11, what have you. And then he told his niece it's then going to be a crazy third world countries, in this case North Korea. I mean, that's the first thing I think of. And then he said after that will be the justification for the commercialization of space. Now, it's interesting he said commercialization and not militarization, because if we take a look, for example, again, not to sound like a Hillary Clinton email thing, but if we look at the Podesta emails, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, I believe was the sixth man to walk on the moon, was sent an email to John Podesta saying our friendly ETIs, and everyone is assuming that means extraterrestrial intelligence, wants to share 0-point energy with us, but they will not tolerate any form of space militarization. So, I mean, I find it quite interesting. That's there in the WikiLeaks emails. It's still out there. So again, it seems like there have been different points in time where disclosure got close, and then there were certain factions that were not privy to having that released. Now, to add to the final part of the compartmentalization part of it, what you said there, Eric, was absolutely right. The government, in my humble opinion, is so leak prone, it's not even funny, which is why what they've done since the very beginning is they've transferred the most important stuff into the military industrial contracting side. So Raytheon, EG&G, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, Lockheed Martin even admits themselves 80% of their work is covered in a program called Skunk Works, and that in and of itself they say is classified. I mean, I say it on my show, at least they don't bullshit us with that. You know what I mean? So at least at least they tell us something there, right? But people have said, former, Senator Harry Reid, they've wanted to get a look into the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, all that kind of stuff, and they've been told no. One of the Joint Chiefs of Staff under Bill Clinton tried to ask the head of the CIA at the time, I want to know what you got on UFOs. The head of the CIA said, sorry, you're not on the need to know list. So what does that tell you when one of the Joint Chiefs, now maybe things have changed again, the shadow government, the interesting thing about those who know about the, you know, extraterrestrial technology, I find to be the case is that it's not necessarily about their ranking. It's more so how much can they be trusted? Do they have a military background? Are they, you know, was their father a soldier? Do we know the family well? Meaning, how well can they keep a secret? Right? Allegedly, when they hire doctors to perform, or surgeons to perform genetic experiments on these aliens, they'll pick doctors that are not the best in their field, but they'll pick doctors that are more likely to keep a secret. Right? You can do all these kind of things when you transfer it from the government side to the privatization side, which is arguably what Gary Webb at the time, who was a journalist who allegedly was murdered by the CIA for uncovering the whole Iran Contra thing there. He was about to disclose allegedly that the CIA needed the drug money to funnel a lot of the secret extraterrestrial programs, because you can take, and which they have, you can take trillions from the Pentagon, but eventually people are going to start asking questions because it's taxpayers' money, right? So how do you fund something that you can't trace at all, that's not even existent on paper? You funnel, you say, for example, to the cartels, because the CIA, not too many people know, has their own version of what the DEA does. Why do they have their own version of that when the DEA does that by definition? Right? And so, what, from my understanding, the way it goes is, look, okay, every handful of months or weeks, we'll seize X amount of shipments of drugs, because El Chapo's in jail, but his boss isn't. Right? So we'll seize X amount of shipments, make it look like we're being proactive, we're doing something, but on the side, you give us X amount of whatever every month in cash, and that's what keeps funneling it. So sorry for the rant, but that's those are my thoughts.
That's great. That's great.
Well, let me jump in, because when you said the privatization, it made me think of the story that I have in my octopus book about Ben Rich, the head of Lockheed Skunk Works, and he's given a presentation at UCLA in 1994. There's some people in the audience. Jan Harzen's one of them, who later, he's an engineer at the time, later goes on to become the head of MUFON, but at the time he wasn't. He was just a student. And Ben Rich says during his presentation, we have the technology to take ET home, and it won't take us a lifetime to do it. And so, which is a hell of a statement. I would think everyone would agree. And so Jan Harzen follows him out to the parking lot and says, I have a follow-up question about the propulsion method that they're using. How does it work? And Ben Rich flips and asks him a question. He says, well, let me ask you this. Do you know how ESP works? And Jan Harzen goes, I don't know. All points in time and space are connected. And he said, that's how it works. And walked off, and he wound up, he died a year later. I don't think of like mysterious circumstances or anything, but the point is that is Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, a secret division. I mean, it's publicly known. I mean, they run out of Vandenberg Air Force Base and places like this. I mean, they're an appendage of the government. They're still private, but it gets a bit murky. And that's a guy that would know. I mean, that's a guy that you talk about, like knowing where the bodies are buried or where the ETs are. That's the guy that would know. And for him to say that, maybe, I don't know, is it a moment of weakness? Was it, I'm old, I'm getting towards the end of my life? Was it, I'll give a little nod to these guys here at UCLA, maybe that, I don't know. But if he knows about that, and if he's correct in his assessment of that, and I have every reason to think that he would know. I don't know that he's necessarily being 100% truthful, but that's a really alarming statement to say. And that's something, and that was 1994. Okay. So let's just say we're almost 3 decades past that. And so we're talking about technology that's been around for a long, long time. And it's reasonable to think that if that guy knows about, if he knows about how the propulsion method works, and this is, of course, the company that's rumored to be building the TR-3Bs, the big flying triangles that people have been seeing for a long, long time. I mean, think about that. If you saw a stealth bomber, which I've had one fly over me, we are just like, oh my God, it's amazing. If you saw that in 1985, that's a UFO. I mean, 100% that's a UFO, right? So if you saw a TR-3B now, which is, you people can look it up, it's a thing. That's a UFO as well, right? But it's probably, it's ours. So
we saw it just a couple weeks ago. That was one of the leaks.
Even the 1977 or 76 Tehran incident, there's clear pictures of it. I mean, they've had that for a while. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I was referring to these very, very recent leaks. The night vision leak that was all over the news. The guy on,
Yeah.
and Mick West, of course, has been tearing it apart. He's like, he even suggested that the blinking lights that are clearly visible match up with like, airport regulation blinking lights or something like that. So that's very curious too.
Anybody want to jump in?
Well, I would add that, it's not historically new that aliens and government are adjacent. One of the first recorded UFO sightings was in 329 BCE, and it was when Alexander the Great was invading the city Tyre, and they actually called them like these flying shields, and it drove a hole right through this wall and allowed Alexander's forces to get into this fortress that they were trying to fight, and they were victorious. And apparently, these lights, these shields, were seen in the sky for days before and days after the battle. But there's countless stories in the Bible. There's stories from ancient Egypt. I mean, it seems to me like if these entities are out there, they've been making kind of pacts with the rulers and shakers, movers and shakers since before the beginning.
Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to touch on here, because my feeling about this upcoming disclosure is that it is a symptom of what you see these people always do. I don't know about you guys, but when I look at all throughout history, you see a sort of theme going on where whenever there's something true and meaningful to us happening, they will mimic it and they will do something very similar and put it out and push it, but it will have no humanity in it or no, I don't know, art in it per se. It's reminiscent of all the ancient descriptions of a devil character where they have no creativity. They have to latch on to us. And, a great example of that is like the music industry. I mean, they just latch on to these artists. They ruin these people's lives. They become completely insane or kill themselves. You know what I mean? So this hold over humanity, it's like they can't do it themselves. It's always a mimicry. It's always a mockery of something pure and something good. And I don't know. I'm not sure if that's really a question for anybody, but just kind of to throw it out there into another level of this, where the deception that we're talking about, it's not necessarily some American corruption kind of thing. It seems to stretch far further back. I mean, I've had people like Clint Richardson on my podcast, if you guys are familiar with Clint, and agree with all of his points or not about the artificial person and this and that. He has a lot of history there in his research, and the maxims of our laws are talked about, and how all of this goes way back, way further than America, to the point where America is clearly some kind of petri dish, experiment in some way. And I wonder how that ties into this surface level disclosure that's supposedly going to be happening. And yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, I think there's a little bit, again, this is when it might sound a little bit far-fetched, but when it's broken down to the point of incremental steps, it doesn't really seem as out there. So with regards to what you're saying there about how they mimic things in the total opposite way of what one would perceive,
it's an inversion.
Yeah, it's an inversion, or a perversion of some type of positive message. It reminds me very much of again, we can cite any culture, religion, you name it, but I'll just use, for example, the Hermetic principles, which is, as above, so below, or again,
I love it.
The yin and the yang, right? Which we can argue is the same concept of what these extraterrestrials have allegedly said about, the creation of the universe. When there is nothing, by definition, there must be something, right? So it's that inversion, as you were saying. Now, I think ultimately, when it comes to that, there is a handful of symbolism that is put in there. I also think that with regards to mainstream culture, I think I think the shift of mass consciousness in terms of getting a large majority of people to focus on something for prolonged periods of time emits a sort of frequential energy that directs, if you will, a more than likely outcome of what you could say these elites would want us to head down. Not that it would guarantee the outcome they want, but it would put us and them in that direction. Now, again, this is when I mean it's a little bit for people who aren't into this as much. You know, we could say humans are working with or taking orders from extraterrestrials, because in 1954, when President Eisenhower allegedly at Edwards Air Force Base signed the Greada Treaty with a handful of different extraterrestrial species, obviously they didn't, I mean, as humans in general, you can't really blame anyone. They didn't know what they were getting themselves into, because he had felt if that agreement wasn't signed, he was more concerned about the roughly 1 million abductions every year that the military was tracking. He felt if there was no agreement that was signed or no deal was made, then they still would have been abducting people anyways, right? So he kind of felt put in a corner. With that being said, he seemed to have made alignments with extraterrestrials that, I don't want to use the word were bad, but had negative intentions towards what their goal was on this planet. And the reason for that was because he was allegedly pressured by the military industrial complex to say, listen, there's certain species that are saying we want to help humans increase their vibration, spirituality, their perception and understanding. But then there's also another set of aliens, which were a certain faction of the smaller gray aliens that were like, no, forget that stuff. Let's exchange technology. So right. I think the military industrial complex pressured Eisenhower to go with the ones that were going to give the technology a lot quicker, right? And again, at the time, maybe spirituality was taken seriously, maybe it wasn't. We're seeing now, for example, pyramids outside or on the surface of classified military grounds, Area 51, Los Alamos, things like that. So what I say is, if esotericism and this symbolism and this sort of insertion and inversion into society and culture, if it's a joke, as people say, and if it's not part of a grand intelligence operation or multiple operations, then how come they're building these same geometrically structured symbols on classified military bases? I'm not saying that I'm correct 100%. I could be very wrong, but I mean the evidence is there, right? But there's a difference between evidence and proof, right? Evidence means there are signs to suggest and it will lead to a probable cause of a conclusion. Proof is like, no, we have it right in front of our face. It's undeniable. So, I could be wrong, but that's my perspective on the concept of symbolism and how it's being put everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting. Like, we've got to a point where obviously there's been a lot of data gathered. Like to your point, Dave. Like, there's a lot of stuff that's out there that people have collected that they're putting together and they're connecting dots and stuff. And I happen to believe that the government, if not somewhat inept in a lot of their doings, they are intentional. So, yes. Like, why now? Like, right? So all this information is out there, but this whole idea of disclosure, like, why is it important for people to be having these conversations and to be thinking about this stuff now?
That's a good point. I mean, I think there's a lot of different angles out there, and especially in our community at large of, kind of questioning everything, there's a lot to say on that, and it can go off in a million different directions. You know what I mean? It's hard to.
I mean, if I could say quickly, I think it's a handful of different things. Like I said, I don't think it's as ebb and flow or as smooth as people would want it to seem in terms of, there's just a big group with a big plan. I think it's more like smaller groups with the overall plan, but they all disagree on the timing of such disclosure, if you will. But I do think right now it's leaning towards disclosure because it's so far out there in the mainstream media to suddenly reverse course. What I would think, at least I could be wrong, but to reverse course would probably be the evidence in and of itself, right? So to go back, I think would be shooting themselves in the foot, if you will. But why now is hard to say. There are some saying that, some argue that it has to do with terraforming the earth to preserve certain aspects of the planet, but that cannot be done unless extraterrestrials are revealed. There's a ton of different theories, right? Some say it's to distract from COVID. Others say it's the opposite way around. Many different things. But I also think at the same time too, it would be naive of us to think that they would just keep denying it for another, I mean, 30, 40, 50 years, because people,
Yeah.
there's tens of thousands of just people with their cell phones recording cigar-shaped UFOs, different shapes, of all kinds, all the time. So I think it would be people would laugh at that too if they said, you know, the CIA or the Pentagon said, no, we don't, sorry, there's nothing this whole time, right?
It's strange because, like, you're right. It doesn't make any sense to backpedal at this point, especially because it does seem like the sightings are literally coming out of the woodwork. They're everywhere.
Well, it's just probability, right? Like you run the
Right.
numbers and it's like, okay, you're telling me all this footage is faked, every single one.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure some of it is, I'm sure, but sorry, you're saying.
No, it's okay. Just the fact that, like, Lou Elizondo is kind of doing that as this quote unquote hero of the people, kind of fighting back against his own department now, and kind of buttering us up to changing his message now over the past few weeks to saying the report's probably going to be a dud. Suddenly he's talking less about the report being a positive thing, and he's, basically buttering us up and saying, yeah, sorry guys, I'm on your side. I really wanted this too, but it looks like they got us again. You know what I mean?
I feel like he knows more than the public, but if he said it publicly, he would get disappeared at some point. I feel like he's I could be very wrong here. I get the vibe, like
I have a hard time understanding why he's still breathing, honestly.
Well, see, that's the thing too. I think it's really circumstantial in terms of who they choose. They need to silence, and who they could ridicule instead, right?
Yeah, fair enough.
But if you notice, Tom DeLonge has disappeared.
Yeah.
They're done with him. He's been discarded. And, to me, my assumption, it's just an assumption, is that it seems to me like somebody or something is making a push to go public with this. And so the CIA is saying, all right, look, let's get out in front of it. Let's control the narrative. Let's send our guys out there. Let's start talking about it. If it's coming out, then it's coming out, but let's at least try and get our hands around it so that we can divert it, so we can make it a limited hangout. We'll give you some information that people would probably figure out anyway, but not the good stuff. And that's what I see. Because when a guy like Lou Elizondo comes out and says the government is against me now, they've deleted my emails and everything. Dude, you are the government.
Yeah, I know.
Stop with the lies. Stop. Oh, they're out to get me. If they were out to get you, you'd have been gotten by now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's
they know where
even
you are.
Before he said anything at all, before he was even a public figure.
Yeah.
I constantly stand by that in general. If they want you, they got you, not just with aliens, but with everything.
Oh, absolutely. Eric, you were going to. Oh.
I was just going to say, once the interview was booked, like, in his name was written down somewhere with a topic in mind, it would have been all over.
Yeah, and that's the biggest problem now. And maybe I'm picking too closely at just people trying to make money, because there's a lot of people that I really used to depend on for information in the UFO community.
Right.
And I was never directly in the UFO community. I was always in this weird psychedelic middle where I was recognizing the UFO situation in my life and in the world. But over here, I was in the ninth dimension most of the time, trying to figure out what was going on inside here with all of these aliens, and kind of trying to map those connections from my, internal to the external, with the writings of Terrence McKenna, and, relating DMT experience to the alien encounter experience. As above, so below. You know what I mean? Is this possibly, this is I'm going to take it in a different direction. What if the real truth of disclosure would be something too, say, spiritual, that they would be completely giving up the ghost of some kind? Like, I mean, I feel as though if it's technology, it's sure, let it out. It's your technology, or whatever. But if it's not, I don't know what to make of that. You know what I mean?
If I could say very quickly as well too, what I found interesting, to add to what you just said there, brother, is that when former head of the DNI, John Radcliffe, under Trump, said that they wanted to bring the UFO report out under the Trump administration, but they simply didn't have the time because they had to watch the wording of certain instances, and they had to still choose what should we redact, what should we reveal to the public. What I found most peculiar was a couple of things. So first off, when he said that it's difficult to explain in this report, like it's it's hard to explain to the public certain things in the report. A few things struck my mind. First off, it's okay if it's classified, a human military weaponry that they just don't want to show that these craft may have interacted with, then I understand why they're having some difficulty. But I also think at the same time, to me, it's very simple. They're either from outer space, from, if you will, underground, hollow earth theory, if you want to call it, or from another dimension, or or it's an adversary of ours. Very simple. That, to me, it's very simple in that regard. But I think what you're saying, that the fact that some of these species craft, as there's been tons of footage on it, actually can shapeshift, or the material is made to actually change shapes, if you will, based, like, while it's flying, while it's moving and all that, based telepathically, because some of these aliens skins, because some of them are allegedly artificial intelligence, or robots, if you will, their skin and their body is comprised of the same material and elements as the craft, which is why sometimes we'll see footage of a craft going from a disc shape to a U shape, or the cigar shaped craft. They get longer, then they get shorter. So that's the other thing too. I think again, we saw the footage of the alleged trans medium UFO the other week, right? People are refuse to believe that, and I'm not saying you should believe it blindly, but let's weigh the odds here, right?
Yeah, it does seem like there's a parallel between, oh, that's bullshit. That's just, people like Mick West kind of ripping things apart systematically. But then there's this other side to things where, I research a lot of people. I have Freddie Silva from Gaia coming on in a couple of days to talk about living temples and how to build, pyramidal structures in my backyard for energy purposes and things like that. It seems that there's a long tradition of what we see from UFOs parallels this very ancient tradition of alchemy and magic and things like that in the Hermetic traditions and things like that. So that, I don't know, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah,
Anybody got anything?
Like the whole idea of like this being all about some technology that needs to be revealed is really hard for me, because like I feel like they're, by their nature, they want to keep things secret, right? Obviously that's what they've been doing forever, so why would they shift course now? And if I have a hard time revealing any sort of extraterrestrial involvement in anything being technology driven, because we have people like Elon Musk they could just blame it on. Right now, I don't know if he's sufficiently trustworthy enough at this point in time, but like I think that anything technology-wise, they could just they have an out, right? So I feel like it is more of like, spiritually driven, or like harkening back to like the symbolism and the I don't know, man. I think that I feel like it's something higher than that. That like they're like people are being put in a place where they're like, all right, something is going to get out there, and like you mentioned, like I think we need to get ahead of it, but I don't know that it's technology. Obviously I don't know at all, but I have
no, that's a good point. I see where you're coming from. I know exactly what you're saying.
Mark, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, I was going to say this control structure that we're living under, we're making the connections between the powers that be and these alien interdimensional beings. I think, like I said previously, this connection's been there for thousands of years,
right?
But not just where empire is concerned. I mean, if you look at indigenous cultures, there's plenty of examples of tribes from unassociated geographical places, right? The Dogon people, the Wajidiri people of Australia, these are people who have intimate knowledge of where certain stars are that aren't visible to the naked eye, which tells us that there's an ancient intergalactic relationship there. Personally, I don't believe that we've been to space, after reviewing everything with NASA and all that. So I'm not completely knowledgeable enough to defend that assertion, but that's just my instinct tells me, like, don't trust NASA, don't trust the fact that we've been to space. So where does that leave me? It leaves me with the only perspective I have, which is the world around me, and my dreams and the psychedelic moments I've had. And I do truly believe that we're all energy. So these beings are most likely, like you guys are all kind of cluing in on, is they're interdimensional, they're energetic of some kind. So exposing the truth of them inherently destroys this, foundation that the control matrix is built upon. It all rests upon keeping us ignorant of who we are, why we're here, and what, where we're going, what the goal of all this is. And those are profoundly spiritual questions. And that's why every time you look deep enough at religion, you find that empire, institution comes and it dogmatizes it, right? But you still have many cases of people who live within the biorhythmic nature of the universe. And if you go even deeper, there's plenty of examples of contact between entities and human beings where the entities are explaining to them, hey, you need to be in harmony with nature. You need to be in harmony with your environment. Like, look at what's happening on the planet. And this all brings to mind this book by Jose Argüelles called Time and the Technosphere, The Law of Time in Human Affairs. I've been talking about a little bit on podcasts I've been doing lately, but it's a profound book. And the way he explains it is that we're living in a biosphere, noosphere, right? Noosphere meaning mind kind of sphere. And in between those two spheres is this technosphere that we've artificially created. And I think that the reason why these interdimensional beings have advanced technology isn't because they're like, ahead of us or anything like that, or they had a head start. It's because they live in harmony with who they are as spiritual beings. And from that point, you can gain a lot more progress technologically because you're working in harmony with the way the world is. I think human beings, for the past however many thousand years, we haven't been living in harmony. Our technology is based around taking things and owning things and controlling things, appropriating the biological means of production towards an industrial one, a man-made one, an artificial one, right down to the calendar system that we're living in. So we don't even understand time well enough. That's why when these space crafts, if we want to call them that, fly through the air in split second, it's like, we're so slowed down in this artificial time matrix, we don't even really understand time itself, so even these beings flying around are hard to understand from this limited perspective. So, but it's important to remember that they've been here just as long as we have. This government, rollout, like, oh, thank you so much for finally letting us know, as if we could figure it out on our own, like, fuck you, these fucking stiffs with their ties and all this bullshit. It's like they're just trying to get more money into these black budget funds, and all, especially with the privatized space force that we have now, and before Trump, it was all about disclosure. If Hillary got in there, the rumors of that were there, and then you saw Trump make Space Force, and now you see, I think it just, the agenda is happening without the political people. It's all going on in this corporate control sphere that's above what we see and who we see in the media and the traditional political establishment.
If I could say super quick, you nailed it on the head there, brother. I mean, personally, I agree with you, and I also think that when we look at stuff like that, it's that's exactly what it is.
The spiritual nature of things.
Yeah. Is there any part of our current society that makes anybody think that we've evolved to a point where now they're going to give us the technology? Like, we are the least trustworthy people currently in the society we live. We just destroy everything. Like Agent Smith said in the Matrix, we're virus. The way we behave. If ever there was a group of people to not give this amazing technology to, it would be us.
But that whole idea of us getting technology, I'm sorry to cut you off, Charlie, but the whole idea of getting technology from someone else, as if we as human beings are so disempowered that we
can't do it ourselves.
Tiny men to come and save us from another planet. You know, that's
Right.
that's the real hint. When you realize the wording, the psychological wording on that narrative that they're pushing out, you realize, oh, this is coming from a point of lack. This is
Yeah.
creating a feeling of
Yes.
disempowerment. That's indicative of the control structure, right? That's the psychological control structure that we're living in, because it's not physical. You could go
Right.
out right now and do whatever you want. No one can
Right.
stop. It's psychological. So when you look at this agenda, Project Bluebeam, or whatever name it's going to go by in the future, or whoever's going to take its,
Yeah.
All right.
get up on the soapbox, whether it's Elizondo or whoever. It was Bob Lazar a couple years ago, Tom Lazar,
Right.
or Tom
Yeah.
DeLonge, so.
Yeah, see,
I
that's
just-
how far behind they are with trying to relate to us artistically, creatively. They thought we all still listened to Blink-182.
Yeah, that's
Some of us
Well,
did.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
some
fair
of us
enough.
did.
Some of us did.
well, I just wanted to say quickly, Mark. I think with regards to what you said about Space Force, I think that's a great example. I agree with you fully. I bring that up on my show all the time. In this particular case, I think Space Force would have been implemented regardless of who was president. I think
Yes.
that part of the military industrial complex agenda, if you will, the intelligence community partnered with certain private corporations. I think that is the where a lot of the power really lies.
That's a good point.
And I feel that when they do, if they do disclose anything, there will always be a slant to it that
Yeah.
it's a perceived threat, because they've got to use the threat component to justify spending money on these certain things. Now, whether or not it actually goes towards any of this stuff is debatable, but the idea is that it's always a threat. It's the terrorists. They're going to come get it. It's an invisible terrorist. It's the invisible virus. It's invisible alien, whatever it is. Give me more money to solve the problem. If we don't have more money, we're all going to die. You don't want to kill grandma, right? So let's just vote for $6 trillion Biden's giving away. Well, that's not nearly enough. We're going to need $60 trillion for this. And if you don't agree to it, then clearly you want to be in some sort of like enslavement camp by these aliens that are going to come terraform this planet and put you to work mining gold in some South African mine so that they can take it back to their home planet. I mean, it's all gonna, you can just see the agenda and the fear in being sort of slowly dripped out, a little bit here, a little bit there, until it's normalized, and then they ramp it up, because that's what the media does. That's what they do. They keep you scared and in a low vibrational state, so that you're not thinking clearly. You're operating from like a fight or flight mentality. And they say, well, what are you going to do? You can't run. You got to fight. We've got to fight them. Unless you want to get an Elon Musk's magic ride, one-way trip to Mars, we're going to have to fight them. And if we're going to fight them, who better than the military? And we're going to need all your money.
Right.
Absolutely. And that's another good parallel to some of the ancient stories, because the Sumerian, as far back as Mesopotamia, you have the Anunnaki. That's like the beginning of the ancient alien theory, basically. And they came to this planet, right? And the story goes that the work was too hard. The work was so hard, they just couldn't. So they had to create something else to do it for them. So whenever we're always wondering, like, why wouldn't they just kill us all? They need us so badly to be sold on every project that comes down the line. And it just seems like a repeating story over and over again throughout our history.
Well, right. Because
when are we going to stop letting it be written over and over again?
Who's there to sell it to, right? If there's no masses to sell it to. But I mean, to add to what both Mark and Charlie were saying regarding the overall agenda, it's convenient how the media picks and chooses things, and that's, we all know here, that's pretty obvious. But what I'm referring to specifically is something called Operation High Jump. And I find it interesting too, because that was kind of slipped into the opening credits of Godzilla versus King Kong with the whole hollow earth theory. Operation High Jump started shortly after World War II. It was headed by, at the time, one of the most respected admirals at the time, Admiral Richard E. Byrd. And at the time, they partnered with Warner Brothers to basically make a documentary or film. Again, this was, I would argue, somewhat when the government still had to justify to the American people where their money was going, right? So they had to make this film to say, listen, we're going to put a good chunk of your tax dollars towards looking into Antarctica. They go there, right? And then there's nothing that comes reported after that. Now, after he died, Admiral Byrd's journal came out, and you can find the English version of that book, but I recommend the European one because it's completely unredacted. The English one has missing pages, interestingly enough, but he said the one part of it was, he said he found an underground civilization. His description of it was very similar to the way Hollow Earth in Godzilla versus King Kong, the film, works. But he said also, more importantly, what stuck out to me was, he goes, if there's ever going to be another war, he goes, we have to watch the poles, because there will be craft coming from the poles. Now, what I find interesting is that that's all on record. That's not a conspiracy. That's not, well, maybe he wrote this, maybe he didn't. His family's got the journal, his estate confirmed it, the whole thing. Now, the media, the government doesn't pick up on it, but they're the same type of government and media to say, assuming when disclosure happens, if it does, well, what do you mean? It's been there the whole time. Didn't you see Admiral Byrd's journal? Like, that's the same type of media to say, you know what I mean? But all these, so the same guy who the American government trusted, granted many years ago, but trusted to go investigate Antarctica, so we can believe him on that, but we can't believe him when he says, there's an underground world, if you will, with different beings, some human, some not, with very advanced technologies. He said some of them were breakaway human civilizations from many thousands of years ago that went underground due to natural catastrophes and never came back up, if you will. So, sorry?
Go ahead, Dave.
Well, I was going to say that's also kind of what I was thinking when former DNI John Radcliffe had said, there's certain things that are hard to explain. One of the things that came to my mind was, with the UFO report, what may be difficult to explain is that some, not all, but some of these craft are coming from underground. Right now, okay, fine, we could say military underground bases, but what I was thinking he was referring to was, more long-term, long-standing, extraterrestrially, created bases, if you will. So, but again, that was just a hope of mine that obviously wasn't going to come to fruition. So,
and again, I know I keep hearkening back to our ancient past, and it's another parallel right there that you mentioned, with the Mayans, because the Mayans say that their gods came and rescued them and took them back underground with them, and that's where they are. So, and it's
right.
just,
it's like a magician, where they say, look up with this hand. I start thinking, look down. You know what I mean?
And it might be, exactly.
In the poles, you do have the poles, or you're not allowed to fly over them, correct?
Antarctic Treaty. Yep.
Right, Antarctic Treaty, and we know that we have some sort of esoteric connection with the poles of Saturn as well.
Right. Yeah.
So there's something about that, and there's something about the poles that have an importance. Obviously, from an electromagnetic component,
right.
we know that. We know that poles move a little bit. We have the concept of pole shifts. So it's reasonable to dig into this, and as under the umbrella of, we're talking about UFOs. So we'll just say it's as reasonable, if you're talking about UFOs, this is a concept that most definitely should be thrown into the mix. Is it possible that they're coming from the other direction, down instead of up?
Right. And it almost seems, I don't know, does it seem more frightening or more comforting to maybe come to the conclusion that whatever it is, whatever the phenomenon is, as it's so perfectly been, trademarked and worded for all of us, the phenomenon, is it more comforting or more frightening to think of it as part of our system, part of our home?
We just love an enemy, though, right? We just love the other, right? But if it's
right.
if the other is already here, like, the murder, the killer's in the house, right? Like that's a trope.
Well, this is the other thing too. When again, I know he's controversial, but the people he brought with him back in 2001 weren't, with regards to their credibility. Stephen Greer in 2001, if I'm not mistaken, held the National Press Club event, attempting for disclosure with a ton of former, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon engineers, especially military colonels, admirals, and all that. One of them said something quite interesting, which is that at the time they had cataloged from that particular admiral's understanding 57 different species of extraterrestrials, some from underground, some from outer space, but those 57 were just the ones that look like us. He said, in terms with regards to, you could be walking down and you could be in a mall, you wouldn't be able to tell. But he said their senses were heightened, which is that they were physically stronger than us. They could see in the dark. They had telepathy for communication, things like this. But what's interesting is, again, we're talking 20 years ago now, 57, at least that he knew of, categorized species that look just like us. So I think what's even scarier is that a lot of them, well, scarier to those that won't accept it, over time, that they're probably walking amongst us. I mean, we can argue strongly that people have had interactions without even knowing, right? Now that those are the humanoid ones, right? I mean, the human looking ones. That doesn't include the alleged insectoids, the small grays, the tall grays, all that. But
does it include Henry Kissinger?
Yeah,
because he might be the 58th.
He's interesting. Yeah, that's for certain. Henry Kissinger, that guy, man.
Oh man, so
the fattest 96-year-old I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
Hey, so I know we've been going for a while, but we have a latecomer. If you guys are familiar with author Bruce Fenton, author of Exogenesis, he's joining us now. Bruce, how you doing, man? Can you hear us? Hey Bruce, how's it going, man?
Hi, good. Sorry that I ran late. How you doing?
Oh, no problem at all. Bruce, I'm Andrew, Deep Share right here. We've got Dave from the Generation Z podcast. We got Charlie from Macroaggressions. We have Eric Stone, and we have Mark from the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast. Welcome to the show. How's it going, man?
Yeah, pretty good. Yeah, pretty good. I've had so busy day. Did a spot on a conference earlier on. Did an hour's talk for just a small online conference. But yeah, no, it's interesting. Listen to a few other people's talks. All kind of weird subjects, weird and wonderful. Yeah, that was interesting.
Well, that's going on here too.
Yeah,
we're going from the political to the exopolitics to way far off. So we've actually started. I'd love your opinion on this. We started off really by digging into our opinions on Lou Elizondo and his coming out into the public, and now his position against his own department and things like that. I'd love to get your take on what you're seeing in this, amazing parade that's happening in front of us.
Yeah, no, I've been having a chat to someone today about that. I won't name names, but I was talking to somebody that's kind of interacted with him. And yeah, no, we're definitely kind of on the very suspicious camp. I mean, look, if I had somebody, if I was in that world, in town, I had somebody that was going to run a PSYOP or something like that, then, if people were suspicious of them, one way you might cover that, of course, is faking a war with them. I mean, you say, look, the Pentagon are picking on you, the DoD are picking. That's going to build the credibility for someone, right? If they're actually, an agent for an agenda, it doesn't hurt to make it look as if, in fact, that they're kind of being persecuted, right? So I find that in itself quite suspicious, really. I mean, you'd think if anything, they would quietly leave the person just to get on with what they're doing, right? Why feed into it by making a kind of a conflict with them, deleting their emails? It just doesn't seem to be an organization that would normally give no comment and just not do anything and ignore all that kind of stuff, right?
Right. It seems like across the board here, we all feel that way. So the question is, I mean, what's your take on this disclosure? What do you think might be coming versus what is at least going to be sold to us?
Mm-hmm. Well, we can't, I'm not sure that you guys have already probably touched on this, but you can't really disassociate this from the global events that are unfolding. We have, obviously we've seen the media has become, just ridiculous. The mainstream media become absolutely ridiculous. Just a propaganda mouthpiece for not just the corporate interest, intel interest, political interest. I mean, I think I don't know if it's half the people, but let's say at least a quarter of people now see the mainstream media as completely sold out. I mean, we had protests in London where there was hundreds of thousands of people, marching, and they actually were outside the BBC studios shouting at the BBC, and it wasn't in the news. It wasn't in the BBC news. So, I mean, you get to the point where it's almost, it is a farce. It's like you say, the revolution will not be televised. It's, that is absolutely 100% true. The people outside their offices, and it didn't feature on the news. So, and we've seen now the level of control on the information for our mainstream media is absurd. So why are we giving UFOs front and center, right? If we can't even get a protest of hundreds of thousands of people on the news, how can we get UFO disclosure on the news? That does not sit right with any critically thinking person, right? So we've seen the media become just transparently controlled. So why are we being given this? I think most people can recognize that. I think people have, at this point, they've seen the absurdity of the kind of the Trump theater show that we had for months and months or years, really. We had all that. We've had all sorts of scams and things that haven't been covered properly by the news. The Epstein stuff. If people aren't going to wake up to the way the media functions now, if not now, when? Because it has become a caricature of itself. So I think we can say that the fact that the UFOs are being so prominently featured really supports the idea that those who run the media are definitely on board with whatever it is that's happening. The question is, of course, as you say, what is it exactly they want from us? And that's the real mystery, is to clarify the exact gains. And I think there's a few possibilities, but I mean, I won't say I know what they're doing, but we can certainly see that, if you're going to reshape society in the way that has happened in the last year, at some point you want to bring it back together into a kind of a new world order, right? And we've seen the whole Reagan speech, that if only there was some outside threat, right, that would bring us all back together again at the end. I mean, there's not much else that can bring us back together at the end of all this chaos. I mean, we've seen the fractures in identity politics. We've seen the fractures in left-right politics, at an absurd level now. We've seen it across the board. There's so many topics right now where it's fractured, open hostility. How are they really going to bring us all back together at the end of the ordo ab chaos process of, bringing the order out of this chaos? How does it end up with a one world together again? Only thing I can think of is bringing the aliens, right? Wheel them out and say, there's either an external threat, or you create a worldview in which we are no longer the only planet. Because then you say, well, look, we are a one race or a one planet in a system of other intelligent worlds or dimensions that, you can see there's not much else, I think, at this point that could, in their minds, bring us back together.
Well said. Well said.
Yeah, thank you for that, because that's very well said. Yeah.
My question though is, when were we ever together, Bruce? I mean, I don't
Sure.
remember,
That's a good
a
one.
world where things were ever, great.
At least there's a myth that we were the Eleusinian mysteries and that kind of thing.
It seems to me a more proper way to describe it is that we've been in a 2,000-year decline, and personally, I think human origins, everything I've learned about where we possibly come from, we fell from grace, right? That's the best way to sum it up. So, Bruce, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that there are actually alien beings out there who might be looking for our best interests in mind? Because that's some of the rumors I've heard. And that's been kind of the myth going back thousands of years, too. You have all these different cases like Fatima and all these beings that appear to people, channeled beings. You have the whole Urantia book that was written allegedly through, a channeled alien being. So what are your thoughts on the potential that there are actually good, benevolent alien beings out there, Bruce?
Yeah, I mean, again, I would use aliens as a catch-all, right? And put in there interdimensional beings, extraterrestrial beings, extraterrestrial beings, throw in the crypto-terrestrials. If we put all of those kind of together and being alien to us, right, that there's intelligences that are alien to us, wherever they originate. If we look through history, there's certainly a theme that we have a contact ongoing with different kinds of alien intelligence that in many cases seem to have a benevolent shepherding influence on us. Even if it's the guy in meditation or whatever, that says he's in contact with something and it tells them, you can do this, you can construct this, or you can write, or you can use maths. And it seems that there's all these claims that these gods, these beings, they've taught us how to plant, they've taught us the sciences, they've taught us how to write. There's arguments to saying that some of that may not be in our best interests, and I totally can understand that as well. But it does seem that at least some of these are given to us in a way to further us along as a species to develop. So I think that, I don't know if they're necessarily the physical ones. In many of these cases, it seems like people get divinely inspired, where they say they had an otherworldly contact with something, which may be in their inner space, that there seems to be a discarnate intelligence, but that's given them information. So I do believe that we have helpful spirits and helpful beings, helpful aliens in this story that seem to intermittently, contact somebody and give them something useful amongst all the noise of people getting contact experiences that really don't add anything or even seem to derail people and civilizations. So I think we've got a mix of, I genuinely think we have real intelligences that are separate from us and that do interact with us wherever they are originating. And I think the question of where they originate is really complex. And I don't know if we can really resolve that, because they can seem to come from outer space, but they could equally, I think if you get to a certain level of technology or abilities, you could really appear to come from anywhere you liked. And I think that's the question there. Some people say, are they from outer space? Well, if you had a wormhole, you can just jump through. So is that traveling through space? Are you going through dimensions? Are you bending time? What does that really count as? Are you a time traveler and interdimensional? So no. I'm wary on kind of defining what they are, where they originate. But there are intelligences that are alien to us that help us, yes, and others that hinder us. Some of those may also originate in here, and that we're projecting them outwards, though. So I think it's a real quagmire to determine which is which and who is who.
If I could ask, Bruce, what's your perspective on the crypto-terrestrials and that type of hybridization experimentation that seems to be, allegedly going on the just below the surface of this planet?
Yeah. There's a theme, isn't there, of the underground base theme, that where there are caverns that seem to be populated with beings, or real bases, things that like constructions that people report they've been either taken to, or some people say they physically have been down there and claim they've been, in trains, networks and stuff connected. But there's definitely a theme, if you look at the shamanic lore, the idea that the shaman went to the underworld, that there was the heavens where they could travel to, and there was beings there who sometimes would insert crystals and things into their bodies and give them upgrades, new powers. So that's an old story, right? It's a really ancient story. And the other thing they could do was go down into an underworld, which is also populated by these strange beings who do similar things. And then you can have a spirit family, in this other world, where you might have a wife and children in the other world, right? So I think, when we look at through that frame, we realize that, this seems to be as ancient as modern humans, this experience of being taken to an underworld or an overworld and having relationships and children. And so, I think there's a reality to that. I don't think that this is something where we're all just dreaming it up, like totally like a mental illness, that there is something either physically going on or interdimensionally going on where we are contacting beings that are having these relationships with us. To determine how much of that's physical and how much of it is non-physical, again, is really tricky. Certainly people turn up with physical changes to their systems. People have said the DNA, apparently in some experiments, people suggesting they found evidence DNA has been changed, and that was it. There are ganglions in the brain in some people showing enlargement. You've got obviously cut scrapes and all of that. But then on the flip side of that, if you look at some of the sort of the Himalayan Buddhist, information I've looked at, for example, there was a master who was, was learning with his uncle. I can't remember the guy's name. There's a book, I think it's the orb, the lotus, and something. But anyway, I remember the guy at some point. But he talks about how he was training with his uncle, who was like a really high master, you know, and he himself was, you know, a master teacher. And he said, you know, he was up in the caves, you know, the uncle is in a deep meditation, and, you know, he leaves him up there in this cave. So he goes to his own area, and he says, while he's in his sleep, and he says, at this point in his practice, he has, every night, he has full control, lucid dreaming. Right? He said, because he's got to that point in his meditation where he's always aware, whether he's asleep or he's awake, right? So he's in this lucid state, and he's contacted there by the dakinis, which are these kind of, you know, spirits in the Tibetan Buddhist system. And the dakinis come to him, and one of them says, you know, there's this text here for your uncle, and gives him this little scroll, and he puts it in his hand, and he's holding the scroll. And then when he wakes up, you know, his hands are still clenched, and he sort of opens his hands, and the scroll is in his hands, right? And so he goes up to his, and he's excited. He says that for him, he's never had something like that happen, right? So he goes up to the cave, and normally he says you won't disturb a master in their meditation, but he's so excited, he's like, you know, uncle. The guy comes out and he says, because you won't believe what happened. You know, I was in this dream, the dakinis give me this scroll, and it's for you. And he's like, I was expecting that. Just takes it and walks away. So, I mean, there's people out there for whom that thing, the idea that we can transgress between that dream world, that non-physical world, and our physical world is not a problem in their worldview and in their experiences, right? So I'm wary, even when we say someone has physical evidence of something happening to them, that whether that's quite as nuts and bolts as we think, right? Because it seems like there's a bleed through between that other world, the non-physical other world, you know, our dream worlds, and, you know, and what's happening here. And again, I think probably some of you know that you see that in the ayahuasca traditions as well, the idea that we're seeing some of these same beings, the greys, reptilians, and insects in those shamanic experiences. So what's going on there then? Because, you know, if they're so physical and flying around in spaceships around Earth, what are they doing inside someone's ayahuasca vision, interacting with them just as seemingly physically in that? So again, I think it's so complex, the idea of sieving out what we even mean by, are they physically there, you know?
Right. Yeah. I once heard someone describe seeing a UFO in the sky. I think I can't remember if it was on a podcast or just someone telling me that it felt to them the same way you tune in and out a radio frequency, where it was physical, but then it wasn't. And I mean, that right there, when I heard it, I'm like, oh, well, I've been learning about frequencies for the last 3 years from so many people. And this seems to line up with that more spiritual side of things. And then when you think about channeling possibly, you know, books written by people, channeling an alien being, perhaps, you can always also go back, and we could tie it all back together. You go back to Crowley, and I know, Mark, you know a lot about his work, and there seems to be a gray being channeled by Crowley that he drew in his, what was it called? Lamb, I believe. And it clearly represents what we associate with gray aliens. And then you just think of what he was into, and then think of the Royal Society he associated with, the American politics that he got into, all these close-knit relationship with all these people that have built this same system that is suddenly about to tell us the truth about UFOs. I mean, what the fuck?
Even TTSA, isn't it, is Ad Astra, and Ad Astra was the organization set up by who was the rocket scientist friend of Crowley?
Jack Parsons.
Jack Parsons had Ad Astra. So we have TTSA that's named for Jack Parsons' rocket organization, you know, and then obviously you got a deep occultist connected with Crowley. So I mean, people have to look at that and say, why is TTSA honoring, you know, the Crowleyite kind of spacefaring brigade, right? You know, that there's something very odd there.
Yeah.
Well, this is the nexus point where, like, the beginnings of sci-fi culture and the end of the, you know, spiritualist movement meet, right? Because a lot of those science fiction writers that kind of created a lot of the fantasies that they sell us with these black budget projects, you know, were inspired to a large degree by theosophists and all these other people who were taking that esoteric knowledge, as you beautifully described, Bruce, where you can see the connections between the true human nature and what we do as human beings in indigenous cultures, as shamanistic practices, that's no different than what these ceremonial magicians do, like Aleister Crowley. So yeah, the connections are all there. I wonder though, you make the point that, it's ultimately seems to you that they are metaphysical or less physical in nature. What do you make of cases like the Green Children of Wolf Pit, where you have this sort of like walk-in case where these children came from that underworld area allegedly and then went on to live lives in this realm and never go back?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, yeah, no, there's definitely those cases where you think, it seems to cross into where it's really hard to say, are they emerging and becoming something like a kind of a tulpa or something where, it just becomes solid, or were they always solid? Is it a real person from an underworld that's come up? And how well verified some of these accounts are, again, because we often, when you look deeper at some of these stories, I've accepted stories over the years where when I've gone back around, looked again at the evidence, it often crumbles, because there's the support for them is less than I assume. So I don't know to what degree as well that the Green Children, just how well verified it was, what's your thoughts? What was the strongest evidence that it definitely happened? I remember the case, but I'm not sure on what was the level of evidence to support that it, wasn't just local folklore.
No, it is an old story, so we can't be sure that these children didn't just come from some other place, but the way that they describe where they came from, it's certainly strange. The behavior of them, what they did in the first 4 or 5 years before they kind of got socialized. It's interesting, it's uncharacteristic of the time as well, which makes it unusual. But yeah, I think I'm not going to dismiss strongest evidence would be in the genealogical evidence that they did. So I don't know enough of that to be able to recite it off the top of my head, but I think it is worth looking at. But I really only brought it up because this kind of fairyland underworld area that has existed in mythology, it's accounted for all over the world. It's really kind of
little green men, these little green people coming up from the ground. But also, if you look in Egypt and stuff, the tunnel networks at Giza and stuff really point to there being some kind of an underworld there. We know that all around the world we have these tunnel networks, across Peru and in Turkey, whole cities under the ground. It does look that at some point humans en masse constructed an underworld, a real physical underworld, which, we're finding bits of it around the world, right? So the idea that there's still people somewhere down there, I don't think anyone should just dismiss, because the places are real, these multi-tiered structures in Turkey are real. You look at some of the accounts. There's some really wacky sounding stuff, like in the Zenda Vesta, in the kind of the text from the kind of Caucasus region and stuff, that we've got, a text talking about a great winter that comes and they have to build this underground structure that's so many stadia wide and all the rest of it. But they're talking about it having self-illuminating, and there's the lights, which are like the stars and the sun. And then there's the other kind of light, which is the self-creating light, which is used inside this bunker, right? They're talking about, they're going down into it. And then they're talking about, and they'll take the seed of all the animals and the seed of people. And every now and again, they have to make some more people. It's like, it sounds like, a bunker with a genetic engineering lab and stuff. So, again, why would they and how would they come up with something so extraordinary thousands of years ago? This idea of, a bunker with its own light system and DNA stuff. So, I think we have to be able to idea that there are real underworlds, and that, we have the ongoing legend of course, like Shangri-La type worlds up in the Tibetan plateau, right? Which now I think there's some interesting links there, because you look at look at the Denisovans, right? These mysterious humans that we know lived alongside us, and they found evidence that they were up in the Tibetan plateau, a couple 100,000 years ago, right? They found the bones and stuff. Now it does make you wonder, could some of these Denisovans have gone into an underground area up there and that they still live there? And we have the Men in Black accounts of these Asian-looking people, these really strange, Asian-looking people that turn up after paranormal events and after all kinds of UFO events, and that don't seem to really understand our culture properly, don't understand objects in people's houses, but seem to turn up and be monitoring the outside world. Now, I'm not saying it is them, but it could be something as surreal as some pocket of Denisovans in an underground bunker up in the Tibet. I mean, it maybe there's something as crazy as that, right? So,
would you, Bruce, would you put the hybrid, or sorry, the Men in Black? Would you classify them as potentially being the result of maybe some of these Denisovans, but also the result of some type of hybrid experimentation of sorts, or are you leaning more towards sort of an ancient like Denisovan background?
Well, one of the things interesting, I don't know if anyone caught the case where they found a hair. There was a guy who had sex with what he thought was an alien woman, and there was a hair left behind. And when they did the DNA analysis on the hair, it tracked to a rare East Asian haplogroup, right? So that's kind of funny, because if these are supposed to be, alien hybrids, why has it got DNA that leans towards some, rare class of East Asian people? So I mean, it may be, and again, of course, with the DNA hybridization program, when we look at that stuff, I personally don't see why aliens need to add any DNA at all to us to make any kinds of hybrids. If you remember, if you caught where Elon Musk said, look, with the right DNA or RNA sequence, we can turn you into a freaking butterfly. He's right. The thing is, if you understand the DNA code to the point where you can play it like a piano, and that's what we're talking about, beings that say are, let's say, 1 million years ahead, where the DNA code is like child's play. Yeah. You don't need to splice anything into it, because you can sit there and just modify the genome and turn us into anything, turn us into a bat or a gray alien, whatever you want. So I think that for years and years, I had that very wrong and thought, it must be half alien DNA. We don't even know if they had DNA, right? The only beings we know have DNA is this planet. So we have to assume that we are the only DNA life that we know of, right? So if they don't have a DNA basis, they can't splice themselves into us, for a start. So that's putting another level of complexity into it to assume that all life out there has the same basis as us. But what would make sense is if they know how to modify us, and that they can change the regulators for coding our genes, so to express differently. So like if you wanted to have someone's head bigger, you can just go to the genes that express skull size and stuff, and change those and start making the gray alien, make the bigger eyes. And, so you could conceivably take a human fetus and modify it in such a way as you end up with a gray alien, right? So now, if you look at some of these cases, we've had the little mummy from Peru, right? And you had the Star Child. And we've had these other ones in a cave in Peru as well now, which is, people are saying are hybrid aliens. But every time they test these things, it comes up as human DNA, right? In all of these cases, they found human DNA. So then people say, well, it's just humans, it's just humans. But hang on a minute. You've got a guy that, 6 inches high, who is saying has got, dozens of anomalies, right? They admit that although they're saying it's human, there's dozens of unique anomalies in this little fetus. And then you've got the Star Child, who just unprecedented anomalies in its skull, right? But uniquely, the morphology is all normal in terms that there's not misshapen, right? So it looks like it's whatever it was, it's the way it was meant to be, right? And then you've got the same with these other free-fingered beings, like they don't look like normal people, any of them. So if you could go into the code and modify a fetus, you can create all of those kind of things, right? And they will come up as human, just with anomalies in the DNA. And I think that's what's happened. I think we're seeing the results of tampering rather than splicing. So it's not hybrids in the way we think about it, but they may hybridize with other life on Earth, take genes out of a frog or anything like we kind of do, right? So
would you, sorry, Bruce, would you attribute, when you say tampering, sorry to interrupt you, would you attribute that also to the very precise mutilations, in some cases human and cattle, that certain independent, surgeons have looked at it and said, even if this was under the knife of the most advanced technology, we couldn't even get this precise with, again, rectal tracts being removed almost seamlessly, it looks like, from the body, the corpses. Would you put that in the tampering category?
Well, differently, but I mean, it shows that there's somebody who has a high level of medical knowledge, and certainly a high level of medical technologies, who's operating somewhere on our planet. I mean, that would support the idea that there are advanced technologies and people interested in the DNA this of life on this planet. You know, if they're harvesting from not just from cows, it seems that, you know, there's other animals, whales, and, you know, recently great white sharks that have been mutilated. I mean, there's really some strange ones out there, you know, that if there are beings that have a high medical knowledge and that they're collating samples from all kinds of life, it's entirely possible they use some of this material in splicing, because we do it ourselves. You know, we're doing GMO where we take, you know, spider gene, put it in a sheep so it can make super strong wool, right? So we probably are a hybrid, but not necessarily alien DNA, because what you would do instead, you could look for traits in other life on this planet and say, okay, well, take a gene out of that moss there and put it in, you know, take, you know, whatever you want. If you know what you're doing, you can utilize all that information that's already here and just change segments of DNA. I think that's what, personally, that's what I'm convinced that we are, is a modification of the code rather than a true hybrid where we'd find any evidence that we've been, you know, alien DNA have been spliced into it. I don't even know if there is such a thing as alien DNA. I think we'd have to establish that there is any alien DNA, right? Because I've not seen anything that substantiates the idea that aliens actually have DNA. Nobody's got a sample of a being, right, that I know of, where we can say, yeah, you know, they're made of DNA too. So it's much more likely that they are just tampering with our code. And that's something we do understand. And we know that we're heading into it now with the CRISPR and next generation beyond CRISPR technologies that have come in already. So we're going to be doing the same thing, right? So we can now understand the technology of the gods, because that's what we're kind of doing. We don't need, you know, splicing in an alien. We're going to be able to just go in and change people and give them longer life and, you know, more strength and bigger brains and all of that stuff, but not easily.
So perhaps this is where, you know, that idea of the mimicry converges, because it seems like maybe they're going to roll out whatever they're going to roll out while this is still possibly happening on the planet for real, and that we could maybe separate the two if we're keen enough to look at it from a broad perspective and not put our faith in people that we have not trusted for 70 years with this information. I had a question for anybody that might be knowledgeable about this. There's a documentary from, I believe, 2016, and it was called Mirage Men. Is anyone familiar with that? Mirage Men?
Yeah, I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what it entails is a story about a guy named Richard Doty. Richard Doty being former CIA, back to what Charlie was saying, former CIA, coming out onto this amazing documentary that back in 2016, I ate it up and I was like, wow, this is amazing. This is incredible. This is giving us a whole new angle that they are admitting this guy's coming out as like a whistleblower, but he was never called a whistleblower. Nothing ever happened there. It was just this documentary where this guy talked about all of his past situations where he purposely misled people, sometimes down very dark paths and believing very crazy things to distract and push away from what was going on out in the desert near Area 51 and places like that, what these people may have seen. There was one, I can't remember his name, but there was one incident where a man had seen some things, was talking about it, was reporting on it. And eventually Richard Doty and his team slowly convinced the man of so many crazy things and then just ripped it out from underneath him, destroyed his life, his family left. The man, I believe, ended up committing suicide. So this man is coming out here kind of claiming to be involved in these very dark projects, trying to push us away from military projects and things like that. And he's now become an absolute sensation in the UFO community, where he's talking on all the different documentary shows and things like that. He's the former Lou Elizondo type character, it seems.
Right.
And to me, it started to stink. And so recently I started to look into who made this documentary, and it's very curious, and maybe it's nothing, but we did talk about symbolism, and we all know that they do use words intentionally and they like to push us in certain directions. Well, the company that made that documentary, and it literally just made that documentary, and I believe just one other, and it was called Perception Management Productions. And I feel that that's perfect, because that's exactly what they always do.
Yeah.
They always put these little titles on things that people like you and I, guys, will pick up on. And they want us to be like, oh, you. For the rest of people, they're not seeing it all. And they're, I guess we could possibly talk about the idea of revelation of the method involved there. I don't know. You guys are probably familiar with that term too.
Yeah, he was also in Unacknowledged, I believe, as well too. The documentary with Greer and a few others, where he said that the CIA does drop off suitcases of cash to certain directors in Hollywood to insert a certain scene within a film, if you will, or something like this. But yeah, I'm on the ropes about him as well too. I mean, again, that's the thing. When you say former CIA, are you ever really former? You ever really X? That's the whole thing behind it, right?
This guy's admitting to letting the government tell him and signing off on the checks and everything to let people, drive them to killing themselves, ruining people's lives. This is just normal business. And he's talking about it. And our UFO community just kind of let him in.
Yeah.
And it's just seems very convenient to me.
He was a contractor for Hal Puthoff for a while.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. He strikes me as the perfect individual who would, again, I could be wrong here, but it would be assigned, as we've seen in recent, I guess you could say, disclosures of certain documents, to insert themselves within particular communities, with not just within the UFO community, but even the paranormal community, any forum or community that is actually fairly accurate. They'll insert themselves in there, and this is not a fly-by-night sort of operation. It seems like particularly the MI6, Mossad, and the CIA, of all of them, tend to at least prominently try to insert certain assets, if you will, or agents that give a little bit of truth. But again, the rest is, the best kind of lie is the one when you wrap it with a bit of truth, right?
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a good disinfo. And if you look at the start of TTSA with Tom DeLonge, in his one of the very first interviews he did, he quite openly said that, the agreement was that they would supply me information as long as I mixed it in with fiction. And I started thought, that's the definition of a disinformation campaign, bud.
Well, I just wanted to, another thing too. Sorry, Bruce, were you gonna say something?
Sure.
Oh, okay. There's another agent, not necessarily having to do with the UFO community, but his name was John Stockwell. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with him. He was more prominent in the 70s, where he talked about openly. He said this was shortly after the Church and Warren Commission exposed all of this stuff, and even under that too, William Casey, under Ronald Reagan, the head of the CIA at the time, blatantly lied in the Church and Warren commissions as well. In terms of propaganda, he said that he admitted in those commissions, yes, the United States does do propaganda, but we take steps to make sure it doesn't come back into the country, right? So that the American people don't fall for it. He said, John Stockwell, and if you look him up, he's known for kind of rebelling, if you will, or trying to start something, but it didn't end up coming to fruition. He said over 400 journalists working with the CIA, some of the biggest names in the business, he said, and that was back in the late 70s. So again, there's some people that will say, oh, you can't do that now. I argue the total opposite. I would argue it's even easier, if you will. He explained very thoroughly. He said, for example, he ran the Angolan War. And think about how scary that is for a second. You're running a war. Think about how, you know what I mean? That whole concept of it. But he said, he goes, in the CIA, he goes, we refer to it as covert action. But he goes, what was it really? It was propaganda. He goes, propaganda mixed in with some dirty, like physical field work, if you will. But he said the whole thing was that they had people in Zambia on the payroll in the Zambia government that would give the approval for the CIA to insert completely falsified and made up stories into the Zambia Times. And then what would then happen is that they would have a reporter on the payroll from London, England, in the UK, to pick up on the story. But the cover was that he would get it from his stringer in Kinshasa, who got it from the Zambia Times. So, and then the interviewer said, okay, so were any of these stories real? In terms of, the Cubans and the Russians eating babies, this was the time during, communism and all that. Mr. Stockwell, at the very least, said, he goes, they were all made up. He goes, we just sat in a room and just made them up. He goes, we had no evidence of the Russians or the Cubans eating babies. He goes, all that stuff completely made up, he said. He goes, he would give some of the names of the people of the outlets he was working with that the CIA was, but he goes, he would expose himself to tons of lawsuits. So
I'd like to point out that they no longer need to do that thanks to the Smith Modernization Act of 2012, which legalized propaganda inside the United States to be used on Americans through Obama. So, and not to say that they weren't lying to us before, obviously they were, but they took the extraordinary step of legalizing propaganda because I suggest that they intended to use some propaganda. They wouldn't have legalized it if they didn't. So a lot of this stuff has been coming out, and obviously the church committee talking about the role of the CIA and in newsrooms and things like that. I mean, it's like, if you believe what the mainstream media is telling you, especially when it comes to some new narrative that just kind of seems to come out of nowhere, then you just have to remember this. You have to remember that, yes, there will be, like we talked about, a little bit of truth wrapped up in there because they have to give you that. But in this information media sausage making with truth and lies, it all gets mixed in and it's not labeled. They don't say, well, here's the 10-minute portion of the nightly news, it's going to be the propaganda portion. It's all mixed in. So you can't trust any of it. They poisoned it all. So is a guy like Lou Elizondo coming out and telling the truth? Maybe this much, right? The minimum amount needed in order for you to believe it. But is it also propaganda? And is it also, of course, I mean, that's what they do. But but even if Lou Elizondo is out of the equation and it's just Anderson Cooper sitting up there, I'm still assuming that it's lies mixed in with truth.
Well, that's the thing too. When you look at, for example, it's funny because when you know what to look for, and I would imagine, presumably everybody on this panel here knows that when we read articles, for example, like when CNN or MSNBC, they start off their show or they start an article with, our sources recently learned from the CIA. It's like, hold on a second. First off, let's put aside the whole thing that, your sources, so to speak. I'm sure some are real, but I'm sure there's a lot that are made up. Now, the CIA has been known to trick outlets like the Washington Post and CNN, where they've had to take redactions in times where they weren't in on a certain operation, if you will. But the thing that I hate the most, that I personally despise, is when they say, what we learned from the CIA. With all due respect, what the hell are you supposed to learn from the CIA? They've been lying every 5 seconds since I was born, even before that. So I don't know, and then they on MSNBC, they bring the head of the CIA on as an analyst, John Brennan. You're supposed to bring people on to debunk the CIA, not to reinforce what the CIA is saying. Now, again, there's the argument that, listen, yes, they do a bunch of messed up stuff. Yeah, but they also keep us safe in the West. And, that goes for MI6, that goes for Mossad. It's tit for tat, right? Like it's...
My favorite is sources close to the president's thinking said.
So it's just
what the fuck does that mean? That means nothing. That's literally saying nothing. This guy thinks he has an idea what the president's
you know what I think the other thing is too, why the censorship is ramped up. I just wanted to say very quickly is that I think people are catching on that it doesn't take some guy in a suit making 30-40 grand a day, which is like what Chris Cuomo or Sean Hannity makes, literally. Whereas people like us are doing 10 times the work, and we're probably crowdfunded, or I like to think most of us are not making that kind of money, right? So it's these guys are making 30-40 grand a day with research teams, and are you kidding me? Like, and I think people are catching on. Like, for example, whether you agree with the guy or not, just to quickly throw this out there, the Jimmy Dore show, he's getting more views than daytime MSNBC and CNN. I think this is what scares them, right? Shows like this, for example, like the Deep Share podcast, it's getting views that I'm sure they could control it if they wanted to, but they'll do it under the guise of, conspiracy equals dangerous,
Absolutely. Across the board.
With Rogan a bit, haven't they? They haven't liked that because it's become so big, and obviously some of the opinions are labeled conspiracy.
Right.
They don't seem to have a full control on that kind of media, because it's really hard. Even if you are influencing something like that, at the end of the day, guests are going to mostly say what they're going to say, right? So it's a kind of a hard platform to really control, isn't it? Because the people are going to come on, even if you could pay off Rogan or threaten them, but those guests are still going to come on and basically say what they want to say. So unless you start editing out whole chunks of interviews, which is going to flag up at some point, you can't really control those podcasts in that way. And I think that's why it's a threatening kind of media for the major state voice,
Yeah.
isn't it? Any of those kind of, you can come on and say what you want to say platforms.
I will say, as a new podcaster, I've been around for a few months and that's it. But man, I've had a lot of very weird ads come to me over Instagram and Facebook for, oh, we'll help you. Don't you worry. So, I mean, I kind of knew exactly what that was. And even Bill Burr said something on Rogan last year about this. When you said, like, guests are going to say what they're going to say, he was telling every young person out there that started a podcast, don't pay anybody to do it for you. Don't let anybody own you. Stay away from it because they're coming. They're trying their damnedest. I mean, I was talking to another local podcaster from New Hampshire, Ron from New England, on the Wicked Planet podcast. And he and I both have been looking into, CB radio technology and stuff like that, because I wonder if we're going to have to resort to something like that. And then sure enough, we found they're removing all the CB towers.
Right.
I had a great conversation. I was in London 2 years ago with and I was doing Renegade Inc., which is Ross Ashcroft did it. He's the director of Four Horsemen. And when we got done recording, we were just sitting on the set and we were talking, and he said that I forget what we had been talking about on the show, but he said that was such a fascinating conversation that we had about this particular thing. He says, back when I worked for the BBC, which was a while ago, he says, there's such maniacs there. He says, if we'd been having this conversation at the BBC, I'd have a producer in my ear telling me, get off that topic, get off the topic. And if I didn't get you off that topic, then as soon as we got done with the show, I'd be called up to the office upstairs, and I'd be in front of a 3-person panel that would be grilling me as to why I wasn't able to get off the topic. I was like, God. And he said, that's why I'm not at the BBC anymore, because I can't. That's not journalism. That's not news. I can't do that. And I thought, oh, that's crazy.
And that's interesting because BBC is allegedly supposed to be one of the more reputable global institutions, right?
Yeah, as they're ignoring the hundreds of thousands of people marching by their office. They're like, oh, nothing to see here. Can't see anything.
Let me ask you guys an off-topic.
Jimmy Savile a platform for 4 decades.
Yeah, what's that?
Yeah.
Yeah, very suspicious. I mean, even some of their own now are slowly, ex-people from BBC turning on it, saying, it's become, a real joke itself. It's running on that narrative of respectability it built up in years past, whereas now it just is not that platform anymore. It's very clear it's a state mouth. I mean, it always has been, but now it's just transparently a state mouthpiece where, we can see stories that major stories are just not running on there. And it's got to a point where it's I think even people that older people that definitely not conspiratorial just are realizing this is no longer the platform they remember, real news. That's gone.
Yeah. I see my elders starting to slowly kind of learn that. My father is starting to kind of not watch any of the traditional news stations he used to watch, and it's kind of slowly but surely happening, but I don't know. It's weird. Is it from just my perspective that so many of us feel the way most of us do about this UFO topic, or is it really a growing thing that we're all kind of getting more wise to these behaviors from handed down from on high?
Something, at least in my perspective, in the last 3 to 5 years, something woke a bunch of people up, whether it was personal experiences at an individual level or something was put out there purposefully. That's my opinion. But
yeah. So
I've been disappointed, frankly, with some of my friends that have willingly walked in. I mean, over the last year, especially with the COVID situation, just and the relationship that the media has with being the only disseminator of information about it or purporting to be, that I would say to them, like, you do realize that the mainstream media is just pathological in their lies. And they're like, what? And I'm thinking, God, how can you guys not see this? You're smart people. You know what's going on. So when I get out of my little bubble of this alternative media world where everybody can see it like that, I and interact with some of my friends that are, or as James Corbett would call them, normies. They're still surprisingly down on the reservation where they're not picking up all of this. And I to me, it's just, it's like I've described it as when you know those paintings that are like all the dots and you have to like squint your eyes and then you can see the elephant in there. Like once you see the elephant, you can always see the elephant. But for everyone else, they're still looking at a bunch of dots and they're like, I don't see it. And I feel like I just want to shake them and just go, it's right there. It's like fucking right there, you know? But I think maybe everyone needs to come to that realization on their own. You know, maybe they need there's one news story that they go, wait, what? This seems crazy. And then the wheels come off of the mainstream narrative. I mean, it's reflected in their ratings for sure. So there's definitely a huge segment of the population that's waking up to it. But the problem is they don't know how to replace it. What do I replace my nightly news with? Where do I go for better news? Obviously it's us, you know, in the alternative media or maybe non-traditional news sources. That's where it is. But they've been so trained to just turn on the TV and look for information there. If they can't go there anymore, they don't know where to go. So they keep kind of saying, well, maybe it'll get better. maybe they won't lie to us so badly. It's like, no,
but that's like, for example, right. People, I laugh when I'm not saying the mainstream media always lies 100% of the time. I'm sure there are certain stories that are in nobody's interest to lie, but that's usually when it's reporting on like a car crash or something. You know what I mean? But the Washington Post has a $600 million contract with the CIA. Interestingly enough, you have to use DuckDuckGo to find that because Google will not bring that up on the first 10-20 pages. I've tried. So the Washington Post has a $600 million contract with the CIA, which is 3 times what the Post is actually worth. And even then, some of the Post's most prominent reporters have been interviewed or caught while they're just leaving the office, if you will, and what have you. And they've been put in a corner verbally in the sense that they can't answer it because they would say, you know, the interviewers would say, what do you think? And these are just citizen journalists, if you will, saying, you know, ma'am or sir, you know, how could you work for a company that has a contract with the CIA? And they can't deny it because they know. Some of them would literally just walk away, say, okay, I'm not having this conversation. Others would stand and talk. But once they're caught with that question, there was one reporter, one journalist, if you will, for the Washington Post. I think Dave Weigel was his name. He was approached and when he was asked that question, I'm not kidding. He had a Starbucks coffee, those ones with the straws. It was full. When he was asked that question, within a minute, 30 seconds, that thing was done. That's how nervous he was to not answer the question. He just kept drinking outside of the offices of the Washington Post, hoping that the citizen journalist would take the mic out of his, like in front of his face. He just kept drinking the coffee. And then he goes, I got no comment on that. Oh, really? Okay. Right. So and the reason why I bring this up is because I have friends and family that send me, and they're not trying to say, oh, Dave, you're wrong, but they're more focused. They believe that the traditional outlets are more reliable, if you will. And so they send me certain things from the Washington Post that I know are just blatant lies. And it's like, my gosh, some people, it's just, they got to figure it out on their own. I've given up personally trying to.
We've kind of, I don't know how familiar everyone is with like a metaphysical thing, but the Hopi prophecy, you know, with the idea that we would hit a point in time where there's a split and, you know, one lot of people are going to one reality and one into the other. And like, you know, really, I think we're in that because I've accepted these people are living in a separate reality to me now. That
right.
Whether they're in the sub-reality or I'm in the sub-reality, depends what perspective you look at it from, right? Which I'm okay with. I appreciate for them. I'm delusional. For me, they're delusional. But they were literally not in the same world, you know? It's almost like the Jesus thing, you know, that you have to be in the world but not of it. I'm in their COVID, you know, UFO psyop world, but I'm not of it because, like, to me, it's like, it was obviously not real, you know? It's obviously not real, but for them, it's so real, you know? And that seems to be where we're at. And, you know, if the Hopi are right, it just gets worse, you know, that they go further and further into that, and that we essentially end up with, at least for a while, 2 worlds coexisting, and then the other one fades out in some horrible thing that fades it out. That's pretty much how they sum it up. And looking at how it's going now, I'd have to say applause to them. They seem to have nailed it because it really does seem to be that.
Well, that's exactly what I'm seeing as well too, Bruce. You said it perfectly. It's almost like, for example, a couple weeks ago, I got banned for 7 days from YouTube, and YouTube said the reason was, quote unquote, questioning the authenticity of the WHO, which I don't remember doing directly, but maybe it's an algorithm or something. What frightens me the most, which should frighten the masses, which hopefully enough people realize soon enough, is that it's not even that they're not letting us create different content. It's just having a different opinion. For me, for example, the most common thing now is the COVID lab leak theory, if you will. For me, it was not about, if it came from a lab, it's not about who's right or wrong. It's how come we cannot lay out all different opinions on the table? How come that cannot be considered, no matter how radical it seems? And I'm not saying this to you guys, I'm saying in general, don't give me this, oh, it can fuel conspiracies, which could fuel violence. So if that's the case, then how about we take away because if they're banning Twitter accounts because people shouldn't tweet, how about we remove people from having cell phones? Because even on cell phones, they could talk about that stuff too. You see what I'm saying? Like, the point is how
any ideas.
Right.
Yeah.
How far are they going to push it until it becomes, okay, we've banned them from Twitter, we've banned them from here. Next thing will be removing their home phone. You know what I mean? Or something like that. Like, how far can you push it? Like,
And how far will we take? How much of it
Right.
will we take? And
Right.
and where is the breaking point for so many people?
well,
Just to bring
yeah.
it around and keep it in the context of this disclosure, it seems like a few different things are starting to roll out over the next few years, and this seems to be the spearhead of it. I mean, we're talking about the scientism, the transhumanism into like these cyborg ideas that Elon Musk is now. I mean, he just tweeted yesterday, like, if you can't beat him, join him, with some cryptic, subhuman quote.
I
about
think
our
that guy
future.
gets, with all respect, I think that guy gets a hard on from trolling every so often too.
I
though.
do too.
I think
too.
I
But
think
he does own
enjoys
the company that's doing. He claims
Right.
something like neural links. I'm gonna find it. You guys keep going. It's
Yeah.
just like.
I mean, even with disclosure, I just wanted to say very quickly that I think this, unfortunately or fortunately, it ties in with politics, in the sense that, politicians keep saying, they've been saying this forever, if you don't like what we're doing, let us know. Well, the people have been letting you know, just like, for example, how Bruce said, many thousands of people outside of the BBC, but they don't cover it. Now, I'm going to watch my words very carefully here, because I don't want to be misconstrued in what I'm trying to say here, but for the people all around the world that are protesting, whether it's for the lockdowns or for disclosure or for many different things because of COVID and all this, a lot of them, the mainstream media seems to be saying, oh, how come these people are resorting to violence? Now, let me be very clear. I'm not for violence at all, nor am I trying to defend them. But to understand their perspective, if you're someone for years who's been calling on your politicians to do something in the masses very clearly, and new politicians get elected, fresh faces, but they still don't make any changes, and then those politicians say, well, if you don't like what we do, then protest. And then they protest peacefully, and then still nothing changes. What you expect them to do? I'm not saying violence is the answer, but I'm saying, what other option do these angry people have? Again, I'm trying to be very careful with my words here. I'm not for violence at all, but what options have you left these people?
I don't think there's any option left, mainly because
Right.
it seems like to me, the whole situation with Trump was a way to segregate a lot of people similar to us, people that question things and go, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't,
Yeah.
I'm not a Trump supporter by any means, but wait a minute, what's going on here? And the Q thing, it kind of seemed like it was a merging of, let's take this political demographic, mix it with people who believe in reptilians, and merge it all together. And then we started hearing about it. We started hearing about domestic terrorism laws against, fake news things and conspiracy theorists. And it just seems like a perfect way to divide us and get us corralled. And it seems to have happened to a lot of people. And it's frightening to say the least. And I just wonder how the deception comes to a point, because it seems to be coming to a point, from a lot of different angles. And I don't think it's necessarily healthy to necessarily stay in these deep, dark areas where, we're constantly focused on them, because of course that's the magician's, best tool. That's what they want. the other side of the coin, guys, what, you know, the more spiritual side, what do you think we could look forward to over the next few years when it comes to, you know, all of this coming to a head in a positive light?
Well, I mean, I'd say one of the things is, you know, with the fact that people are, at least a section of the community are waking up and becoming more aware, is that, you know, as that segment of humanity gains greater and greater awareness, I mean, it is a kind of superpower. I mean, you know, you can see the world for what it is, right? So it's going to be really hard in the longer run for them to do anything with those people or to those people. So it's almost as though they're corralling the weak of the herd, you know, into the farms or whatever, you know, but the rest of us, I think really there's a good chance the future's pretty bright if you can stay out of that corral, you know, because I don't think they really want to deal with the people who have awakened to themselves and to their abilities and, you know, psychic abilities, you know, all the rest of it, you know, that they're able to see through everything. You know, I don't think they really want to deal with the millions of people that are like that, and that they are breaking away with their little collective of those who haven't woken up. So I think the future could be quite bright, but it will necessarily go through a period which is, like, to me, looks like it'd be terrible, you know, to get there. That's just,
change is painful.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know.
I think for the people that are already here hearing this message, it's important, like what you said at the beginning of that, Bruce, is like, awareness is the first step. So you're already here if you're listening to this. So you create your own reality from here and stop worrying about how it affects other people. You start to create this kind of, you know, wave that other people follow along with, you know, be a leader, not a follower. And I think that when you really take that into creating your own reality, you know, it sounds like self-help stuff, but it branches into every single part of it. Because like we mentioned many times throughout this conversation, these beings are probably energetic, you know, the point Charlie made at the beginning where it's like ESP is how they're doing it, you know, everything's conscious. That's the real secret that they're trying to keep from us. And they're going to make things look more dire, more extreme, more desperate as they feel like they're losing more and more control. And why are they losing control? Because there's so many people here right now hearing this message, aware of what the truth is. And that creates such a profound effect that you can't meddle with it. You can't use black magic on that kind of whole human earthly goodness.
Well said. Well said.
I agree fully. Yeah.
Does anybody else want to say anything? I think we're going to wrap up a little bit, but yeah, if anybody, yeah, go for it, Eric. Yeah, you've been silent for a while, and just to preface, me and Eric typically have conversations like this where we're kind of coming from like two different angles on it. So I'd really love to hear what you thought so far of all these different perspectives.
Yeah, I mean, largely we agree though. So like I think that we take different paths to get there oftentimes. But I mean, like I haven't heard anything objectionable. So nothing to speak of there. But I'm really curious. Like, what do you all think we're gonna get at the end of the month, if anything? Because I happen to think we're not going to get anything. I really think we're not, like, we're going to get nothing. I'm
gonna go with a dilly-dallying of words, basically bringing it to where we started. So can't confirm, can't not confirm. My expectations are 0, by the way, for this. So
yeah,
that's just me personally. I hope I'm wrong. I really do.
Same, right there with you though.
Yeah, I would agree. I would absolutely agree that this is going to be a dud. If anything, maybe some form of technological leak, but I don't know how they're going to roll that out without an explanation of where they think it might have come from.
Right.
And if it's not our hidden technology and it's not a foreign adversary hidden technology, I'm very open-minded to even just sitting back with a bag of popcorn and finding out what they're going to come up with to tell us. And it does kind of worry me. I've talked to author Micah Dank about his ideas about astrotheology and how a lot of this is all symbolism and things like that. And it's how a lot of people believe it's kind of coming to this new religion. And since the old ones don't work anymore, this is kind of what they do. It's coming back around to this new religion, and it's going to be a form of science. I can't call it real science though. So that's my take on it so far.
I see predictive programming and things like the UNICEF commercial where they're talking about this alien child and they're going to incorporate him into the school system. Hey, come on in. You guys you want to come play with us? And it's like, what the fuck are you guys doing here? Like, what is this? Of all the I worked in advertising. Of all the concepts that came through, this is the one you picked. Why? So I feel like they're definitely prepping us for something. When it comes, it's all about the platform that delivers the message. Am I going to trust the message that comes from Fox News or CNN? I mean, my default is automatically switched to no. I mean, I'd be interested in what they have to say, not because I do it as the truth. I'd be interested to know what the narrative is they're trying to create with it. So I expect in the future, I mean, what's going to come from this, but very, very little truth will come from it, but probably we'll get a new narrative. We'll get some new agenda. We'll get the slow incremental building up of this potential threat. Then maybe maybe they're going to run the virus threat for the next decade. But then after that, it's like Werner von Braun said, the alien card, are they going to play that at some point? If they do decide to play it, first of all, they better be damn good with it, because if they drop the ball, it's over for them. But
don't get on the ship.
Right. Don't get on the ship. Yeah, but it'll take a while. I feel that this is something that you can't, much like you can't drop reptilians on somebody on day one of a conspiratorial conversation. You can't drop aliens on someone. You got to kind of work some people into this gradually. So my expectation for the release is, the proverbial nothing burger, but wrapped in some things that will lead us to be fearful. Got it. What if they're going to get it, so maybe we should up our funding for the Navy, since the Navy keeps seeing these USOs come up and everything. Well, maybe we need to give more money. So but anyone that's like, 180 days in, we get disclosure and it's going to all happen. Stop. I mean, that's just magical thinking right there.
Yeah, I mean, like, you guys familiar with Alexander Wendt? I think he's a political scientist. He's done a TEDx on UFOs, and also he's written about the anthropocentric kind of model with UFOs and how the hierarchy cannot really allow aliens, or even something like UFOs that might represent something beyond us. You can't really have that enter the paradigm, because it then places the potential for something that's above the hierarchy, like an ultimate intelligent being, right? That's beyond them. That destabilizes the hierarchy. They have nothing to gain by bringing in that element, right? Nothing to gain. So the only way I can see that they can bring UFOs, which potentially, may some of them be aliens, the only way they can safely merge that is if they bring in self-created, safe UFOs that are safe for the system, allow everybody to accept UFOs are part of it. Yeah, we've resolved the UFO thing, but you cannot bring in the unknown, the anomalous, because that could destabilize their positions, right? So I just cannot see there's any way that they can have advanced aliens being confirmed, because that removes them as the top of the hierarchy instantly. People can be like, but what do the aliens think, right? Because you're not going to think anymore, what does Bezos, and you're going to think, but what about the transdimensional aliens? You can go through wormholes. What do they think of everything, right? Because they're the instant top of the hierarchy, and everyone's going to wonder what's their next move, not what these billionaires and their hidden powers are doing, right? They're going to be relevant. So I just can't see they're going to allow that.
I just wanted to say very quickly, the Department of Defense just tweeted about 4 minutes ago that the Department of Defense, in correspondence with the Pentagon, have announced that President Biden has been officially briefed on the UFO subject. Again, whatever that's supposed to,
a big nothing burger.
Yeah, whatever. That's my point. I didn't mean to hype everybody up. I was trying to bring it down, not up.
We told him there's nothing.
And 4 minutes later, they'll tweet, and President Biden has now officially forgotten everything that he
the only thing I can think of is that it's sort of like, I mean, I'm stretching here, I'm reaching, but I just feel like, I guess they've confirmed UFOs, because for 70 years NASA, the Pentagon said no, we just see clouds. So I guess but still, even then, they're still by definition unidentified. So
Yeah, but why hasn't he been briefed until now? Like, also, it's like, wait, okay. Great,
well,
thank you.
I firmly believe that presidents, particularly in recent years, are not briefed nearly as much because they're placeholder seats. I feel like people like Eisenhower and Reagan knew far more than what, Clinton, Bush, Obama. I feel like it's the Dick Cheneys of the world, the ones that are really in deep with the military industrial complex. They're the ones that really know what's happening. That's
It goes
just my
back to the
opinion.
compartmentalization right there
Correct,
again.
correct.
He's thinking in
Again,
France by design.
official front end ranking, not necessarily always being taking the cake as to who could know. A Lockheed Martin engineer, excuse me, could know far more than the president's chief of staff.
Yeah, the executive branch is by design the weakest of the three. So
Yeah.
Right.
makes sense. Mark, what do you think? What are we going to get? Anything?
Yeah, I think Pope Biden is the new, Pope for the alien religion that's coming. They're going to drop him dead like a fly, blame it on the aliens, and then we'll have Kamala Harris as our new female. But all jokes aside, Monica Perez kind of predicted that when I spoke to her recently. She said that they've been
She's great.
playing on this kind of Oedipus complex where it's like, you kill your father for the mother, something, going back to the symbology. We didn't get too heavily into that, but yeah, my prediction is that Biden's gonna not make it the 4 years.
I would agree with that.
Apparently, Jimmy Carter, again, I have nothing to substantiate or ascertain the veracity of this, but Jimmy Carter, well, the latter half of the story, but when he was running for president, as I'm sure many of you know, he said he was going to disclose everything on UFOs. When he got in there, he said he wasn't going to for the sake of national security. Now, this is the part where, again, this is pure speculation and rumors. Allegedly, what he was briefed on was not even the full picture, not even close, but what he was in fact briefed on was so disturbing that it turned him from a devout Catholic into just a sort of like, I don't know what to believe anymore. So again, now keep in mind, this is the 70s, right? People's worldview was far more narrow-minded and things like that. So again, to say that, the perspective he held in the 70s is what we still hold now, I doubt that, but just interesting to note.
There is something to say on that. I've been thinking for a very long time that just overall, the fact that the truth hasn't come out about UFOs to the public on accident, that this is so perfectly tight knit that it begs the question, what is really behind the curtain there? Because if it is an extraterrestrial species from outer space, maybe I'm on an island with this, but I don't think you need 70 years of predictive programming in sci-fi movies, even though it's there. I don't think you need that to ensure that 7 billion people aren't going to literally lose their minds. I think it would be a period of coming to realization and understanding. And, it would probably be like any great, horrifying, scary realization in life. I don't think it's going to derail 7 billion people. And I don't think they thought that either. I feel like that might be a little bit of a cop-out to suggest that it's just going to drive everybody mad.
Look how derailed the people are now, for Christ's sakes. I mean, they've
we're off
deranged
the
the
rails.
entire generation, right? They've deranged the young people today beyond belief. I mean,
Yeah.
how could they be made worse by bringing in aliens?
Well,
I
I just
deranged us all.
Right.
I think
Well, what I find interesting too is what you said as well, about what actually all you guys are saying about how people are probably ready. There was one instance, for example, that in the 1980s, President Reagan was about to go and disclose this with at the time, the Secretary General of the United Nations. And allegedly, the Secretary General was abducted, and there is evidence to suggest that he was. Apparently, he was abducted by gray aliens, and this is again, the out there part that you shouldn't tell someone on day one, but was being controlled by gray aliens. But those gray aliens were controlled by humans working with extraterrestrials in order to spook Reagan. So it was sort of like, the way a mobster would, leave a bullet at your front door if you're about to go to the police or something. Same idea. they're about to disclose it, and then someone gets abducted, and it spooks Reagan enough to say, okay, let's not do this. So the point is that I think there have been multiple factions pushing for this, but the ones that want to hold it back have held the strength, if you will.
Yeah, and they're the ones releasing it, possibly.
Right.
Releasing it.
We can argue that very strongly. Yeah. Yeah.
Because allegedly Jim Semivan had beings in his bedroom, and it with his operate on his wife or something, or
Wow.
I don't know the story, but supposedly Semivan has had some kind of contact with Grays appearing in the bedroom. So again, but then he's the CIA director of internal operations in America, and what was an illegal.
Yeah.
I mean, is that a guy I can trust? I don't know if he's really had. So, yeah. The problem is that you can't believe a word these people say, and you know that. Because you can think anytime they tell you that's what happened, you think, so the opposite happened, you know. So
inversion.
That's the problem with those guys.
Yeah.
Mark, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, sorry, I don't think my connection is too solid, but yeah, really, my conclusion that I would like to assert is like analyze what we're talking about. Central Intelligence Agency, right? The intelligence, the psychology of it all. That's what it really boils down to. I think ultimately the messaging that's associated with this conversation for me, not here, but when people talk about aliens generally, there's a lot of fear, right? You're coming from an angle of fear of, you know, that same disempowerment. I think ultimately, if there are alien beings out there that have anything to benefit, they're not going to be, you know, working with people like the United States government. They're not going to be working with, you know, any of these Western powers or even China, Russia. I don't think that they would, but it's clear that there's some sort of, to me, weird connection between the elite with the real controlling structure and these entities. Mm-hmm. And if there are truly really beneficial aliens out there who can help us, I think they probably go by this prime directive where they can't intervene unless we're, you know, really in the you know, right state to receive that intervention.
Right.
Like we need to deal with these problems that we're having as human beings first before some kind of big change can happen. So any of these promises of like, oh, well, once we make this deal with the aliens, we're going to give you guys all the technology that we've been hiding. It's like, no, it's all bullshit. On the 25th, they're just going to keep pushing this ball forward so they can keep increasing the fear and playing off that fear that they always have, that the elite have always used to maintain their control.
Honestly, I couldn't think of anything more terrifying than a race of beings that wants to talk to our leaders and to the military and give them super advanced technologies. Christ, that's the most horrifying scenario I can imagine.
I'll take it one step further, Bruce. I would even dare to say what's even more frightening is these beings giving our leaders this technology and our leaders using a some type of false flag to justify militarization of space. But again, apparently that hasn't happened yet because other species or other much more powerful species wouldn't let us, I guess, as humans, if you will. But again, that's where I'm kind of confused as well too, because you know, I'm not just going off of the Podesta emails. I'm sure there have been some species that have been very hesitant to share certain technology. So again, can humans militarize space under the, you know, the protection or guidance, if you will, of a certain species that may not have humans' best intentions at heart, or has that been squashed, if you will? And you know,
well, I mean, just something I've also written about in my book, you know, the idea that the beings have been here in the past, modified, and all this. But one of the things that they claimed from the information I got was that, you know, they could just send a comet or a meteor and just fling it at our planet. So I just wonder that, you know, how scared would beings out in space be of us militarizing our near space?
Right.
I mean, it doesn't seem like it'd be a real concern for a true interplanetary species that they could end this world so easily that, you know, us having a few pea shooters flying around us in satellites would be almost a joke to them. The idea of threaten these species, you know, I just can't see it, because it must be so easy for anyone who has craft. You know, obviously we don't have real spacecraft to just fly past, send some weapon at us, a bioweapon or a meteorite.
Very good point.
So maybe they would let us do it. Maybe they would just keep watching and think, as long as you don't get to a point where you genuinely can bring this out to us and be a pain, we'll keep watching until then. I don't think we can threaten them.
Oh, I agree fundamentally, which is why that's what I mean. I ponder that, both sides of that constantly.
And what I will say, it's interesting. I heard when I was talking to Micah about the astrology, we kind of talked about how it almost feels like a parent giving a shortcut to a child. Like, okay, listen, you want to know how to survive. When you see the bull right there, put the plow on the bull. Okay. Eventually. So, and that's how he described it to me. And it fits. And unfortunately, it does take a lot of the spiritual aspect, at least out of astrology, which is weird because it's pushed in the opposite direction in the new age so hard, but it does almost seem like more of like instruction plans, easy way to teach children how to do things. And it's kind of the same thing with this. It feels the same way. Like maybe the only way an intergalactic species would not want us to militarize space is if they actually had our best interest in mind.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, because they know the weapons will be turned downwards very quickly, not outwards. And
right.
Control us and threaten us. So, and also, if they're crypto-terrestrials and that they're living underground, again, they're going to see, well, you're going to point these down, aren't you? You're going to make this a pain for all of us.
Right.
That's the kind of scenarios. And again, we should think very carefully, because any advanced civilization like that could create a targeted bioweapon that just removes humans from this planet. We are nowhere near where we could do anything. And no matter what any of these people saying out there, we're getting ready to fight them. And Tom DeLonge have hinted that we're nearly ready, that if they do something, I think, come on, man. All they have to do is just send one spore in a probe or something to us, and we're all gone.
Oh, right? I think if they wanted to, they would have done it long time ago.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't think this is somewhere it's going to be any kind of a fight ever. We're not. Ants don't fight elephants and all the rest. It's a point where that's not part of it. I think that if they wanted to do that, if we ever were annoying enough, then they would just remove us. And also, I think it's more complex than that. That that this world, I see this world as a kind of for them, there's some kind of an experiment going on here, and so you're not going to really want to just wipe it if you feel you can still correct the paths in where it's going. So
of course, yeah.
So I don't think they're going to do that. I think that they're much more likely to intervene in other ways, subtle ways, and just nudge us. Maybe not always subtle, but if you look at history, the idea that sometimes maybe they do cause a disaster here and there, and they don't see it as a problem because they see us as eternal beings, that eternal souls and all the rest of it. And that, so what if 1 million of you die while we reshape the experiment? You'll only come back somewhere else. What are you crying about? Maybe their perspective is totally different to the way the average human look at that as this horror. They wouldn't see that as an issue at all. Like, what are you complaining about? We're just going to kill a few of you, and it'll get everything back on track, and that's fine.
I don't think, and this is just based off of my research, I could be very incorrect here, but I don't think that the ones that even are helping us with positive intentions, with purely positive intentions, I don't think they feel, it's not necessarily maybe they don't care, but I think they don't feel the bear or the weight of the responsibility to constantly prevent every single death. Right? Because Bruce made a phenomenal point in the sense that people looking at this from an external point of view, coming into this, trying to learn about this, you would think, okay, if they were here, why wouldn't, and they had good intentions, why wouldn't they just save the planet? Everyone's happy and this and that. But Bruce made a phenomenal point. So, yeah.
Well, one thing I just add on to that, there's often the narrative that they're here because of our nuclear weapons and that they turn them off and they're going to stop nuclear wars. They didn't stop Hiroshima or Nagasaki, and they didn't stop any of our nuclear tests.
Yeah.
Right? So there are loads of them. So if it's really giving ripples in other dimensions or whatever, they don't seem to really care about that. So clearly they will let us use nuclear missiles on ourselves because they have. So there isn't that, the fantasy version where they're just going to step in and stop wars. Didn't stop Second World War, the First World War. So I don't think there's that level. Maybe they would step in at an extinction level event, possibly. But everything short of that, they seem to allow to happen.
Yeah, it seems that they just come in afterwards and go, "Oh, hey, a few of you are still here. All right, well, take. Which books do you want to give them?"
Yeah, exactly.
All right, cool.
Exactly.
Well, listen, guys, it's been really great. There's a couple things that we didn't really get into. Like, I wanted to get into Susan Gao from the DoD and how fucking corrupt
Oh,
she is and all that, but that's okay.
With FOIA and how she's trying to, yeah.
Yeah, and that is another angle that I went on Dangerous World podcast recently to talk about that, about how, how far can we even trust FOIA when, John Greenfield from the Black Vault, he's been doing this for so long. He's a master of this FOIA stuff.
Yeah.
And while he's in an appeal he corrected the way he said something and kind of reappealed to get Lou Elizondo's emails. That's when all of a sudden, come back, oh, there's no results for Lou's emails and everything. It's like, well, if FOIA can how effective is FOIA for these bigger issues when you think about it? I mean, all they have to do is just go, yeah, well, that document doesn't exist to give.
Well, you see, for example, not to bring this up now, but you see, for example, as a recent case, Fauci's emails, a lot of his responses were redacted. What's the point of a FOIA request if they're redacted?
What's the point? It's just bait. It's just bait, like Mark's been saying about the fear. It's just to keep us guessing, keep us confused, and keep us fearful. So I think if we remain on the outside and just keep pushing the positive light that each and every one of you guys do in your work, I think that's the most important thing we can do.
Well, I just wanted to thank you for bringing all of us together, man. It was a great idea to do this. Thank you so much.
Oh, I'm honored to have you guys on. I've listened to you guys on your podcast. I've read your book. I hang out with you, Eric, all the time, and we debate these kinds of things all the time. And I was really glad to have you. Eric almost didn't make it, so I'm glad you did.
Thank my mom.
So you could eat. So if you guys want to just kind of plug the best way for people to reach you guys and get your work, go for it.
I'll go first if
we're also polite.
People can find me at My Family Thinks I'm Crazy. It's a podcast I do. And I've been on a bunch of really awesome podcasts lately, including this one. So you can probably see me on, Project Cheney just came out. And we just did an episode with Isaac Weishaupt that just came out. So My Family Thinks I'm Crazy is the podcast. Give it a listen.
And just to note, Mark also started the Alt Media United collective of podcasters that a few of us are a part of. So I think it's a really great thing what you're doing, man, bringing us together. That's an idea that a lot of us seem to have. We're all talking about it this year, and you made it happen. And I'm really, really happy to be a part of it. Just want to let you know. Thank you.
And thanks for bringing that up. The cooperative is moving along. So if you have a podcast and you're interested in taking part, just check out our website, altmediaunited.com. There's a place you can submit your information, and I'll get in touch with you.
Cool.
I'm a part of that as well. Thank you, Mark, for setting that up and inviting me. You can find my work. My podcast is Macroaggressions, and also the Union of the Unwanted. We do a group roundtable discussion, kind of like this, twice a month. And we bring in experts and content creators and have a really good time. My website is theoctopusofglobalcontrol.com. You can find my books there and things like that. And thanks for inviting me. And by the way, if anyone wants to get the Project Bluebeam
Oh, that's awesome.
shirts are available through my merchandise store. That's you can go to the Octopus of Global Control, and through there you can get all kinds of stuff like you get Building 7 mugs and crazy stuff that
nice.
Just guaranteed to trigger people in your close proximity.
Stuff that Amazon would gladly accept as a product. I guess I'll go next. You can find me at Generation Z Podcast on Instagram, Twitter, or YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Podbean, or at patreon.com/Generation Z. The reason why I wanted to bring that up is because YouTube is censoring me more and more. On the Patreon, we record episodes using a shareable Dropbox link, so we can really talk about anything and everything on there. And that's where you can find me. And thank you so much again for having me on.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Thanks for coming on.
I mostly can be found ranting and irritating people on Twitter.
I follow you, and you are very good at both, and I appreciate that.
Exogenesis HH hybrid humans. Someone said that HH was due the Nazis, so I don't know, but I just use that. But Exogenesis HH is hybrid humans. And on there, I mean, at the moment, I'm not doing very much on my websites. I have a brucerfenton.com and like a couple other websites, but they're not up to date, so I won't really plug them. My books are on Amazon, so it's a horrible company. You can also get them from me direct, so which either through eBay, which I don't really know how horrible they are, but you can get them through eBay, or you can email me, you know, bruce@brucefenton.info and ask for a copy. That's the main things at the moment. Also got a short documentary on Amazon Prime, which is 780,000 alien origins. Something I should know the name of my own documentary.
Excellent documentary, by the way. Highly recommend that.
That's it. But mainly annoying people on Twitter. So what's there?
All right.
You,
Thanks,
you can
Bruce.
find me on Twitter, I guess. Andy retweets me all the time and comments on everything that I post. So if you follow the Deep Share Twitter account, you find me there. And if you want, I don't know. Or I'll be on the Deep Share podcast again someday. I don't know.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, we'll have to do it
Appreciate
again.
you having me.
Quickly said, well, thanks everyone. And also, I mean, I think the future of podcasting is going to be more roundtables. I really think that they're a great format. Loving seeing those starting to occur more in these fields. So it'd be great to do something like this again. And yeah, appreciate talking to all of you.
Thank you, Bruce. Yeah, and I was totally inspired by Union of the Unwanted, obviously.